Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to day 3 of BioSummit. I don't know about you all, but I cannot believe we've made it to day 3. It's been 2 days, but it feels like a whole universe of things have happened. So it has been a crazy 48 hours, and we've got another awesome 24, not 24 hours, I guess about 12 to 14 hours for you guys left. But again, I'm so excited to be here with you all. We're going to get started with a very, again, packed day today. We're so honored to have Jenny Molloy joining us from the Open Bioeconomy Lab and also the University of Cambridge. And we have an amazing set of speakers again for this morning. Thomas Landrain from Just One Giant Lab, JOGL. Dr. Susan Blumenthal, who previously has served in 4 administrations here in the United States and was a former assistant Surgeon General, to help talk about a future field of public health technology. Pataranutaporn from Freak Lab in Thailand and also the MIT Media Lab to talk about CyberBiome towards biodigital symbiosis with microbes, machines, and magic. That talk is going to be epic. And then we'll be joined, I'm really, really excited for this. We've got Lisa Joy from Westworld. The co-creator of Westworld is going to be here with us. Hopefully some of you have seen HBO's Westworld. But Lisa will be here for a fireside chat a little bit later on in the about 2.5 hours. So we've got an incredible morning. And then we've got regionals today. So just as a reminder for everybody, except for Asia Pacific, which had a regional several hours ago. We did, yes. And we'll do a quick report back about that in a second. But the Europeans, the North Americans, folks from Latin America and Africa, at noon, at 12 p.m. Eastern time, right as the fireside chat finishes up, grab your lunch and settle into a Zoom room with your regional group. And we'll have a really nice just kind of gathering and opportunity for you to connect with folks from your region before we shift into the afternoon sessions. Again, kicking off at today at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So, so very, very excited for our agenda. Before we get started, I wanted to just open it up for some reflections and some thoughts so far about your 2 days of BioSummit. I think maybe we could actually do that Asia Pacific report back. I'm not sure who unmuted. Allan, was that you?
Yes, that was me, but it's Chungkai here. It would be good if he wanted to report. Is he here?
I do not see CK at the moment. Adeline, do you want to give a quick report back, if that's all right?
Yeah, sure. So we very last minute managed to organize something while the dancing was happening this morning. And we got about like 25, 22 people. Salim, actually, I thought I saw you pop in and then you popped out again. Salim, if you're here. But yeah, it was really nice. We have a WhatsApp chat that
I tried to log into, but my Zoom crashed and I couldn't just log in again.
Oh, okay. Well, we had about 20 something people. We have a WhatsApp group, so we kind of reached out there. And it was really nice to kind of like reconnect with some older BioSummit people, people who haven't been at BioSummit, but like in Indonesia, Life Patch. And then also we had one interloper from Argentina, Jimena, is she here? She said that there was no meeting this year, regionals for Latin America, and so anyway, we welcome her. And
but there is a meeting for Latin America. So all the regions are happening in at lunchtime. Yeah.
Okay, I think maybe she didn't see that. So anyway, she came and crashed hours and shared with us what she was doing. And we had some folks from Australia, so that was really nice. Everyone kind of shared little updates. I think the last 18 months have been difficult, you know, to kind of keep in touch. And so I think people are sort of recharging, and we're all there might be an event in Thailand next year. Henry Tan, I don't know if he's participating in BioSummit this year with Freak Lab, but they're thinking about having an event next year. So maybe we can do a sort of a Asia regional meeting in Thailand maybe. And so we'll see. yeah, we had a lot of people from Sri Lanka show up. I don't know if they're here from Benzyme. Really like this like youth driven initiative. Are any of them here? Osadi and okay, maybe not. Anyway, it was really nice. I think we're gonna try and have another roundup call again in January, Salim. So you have to be there and help with the planning. And I think there were some topics that we're thinking about for Asia and how we also bring people together and help people to maintain their spaces. And Jana mentioned like mental health. So I think also maybe, you know, I think mental health is a big part of how we support each other, not just technically and, you know, professionally or whatever we are all trying to do in terms of biology. So yeah, I don't know if anybody who was there wants to share, but it was so lovely to see everyone. And we did take a photo.
Oh, that's great.
And we'll share that later on.
Beautiful, beautiful. So everybody, well, Salim and Allan, thank you so much for the report back. And if you guys haven't already, be sure to make a Slack channel for the Asia Regional as well. So that way people can plug into that. And
we will, but WhatsApp seems to be very popular.
No, but that way so people here can join, because people here won't know how to get onto the WhatsApp group. You know what I mean? So make sure to set up that Slack so that there's a way to connect with those two methods of communications. So cool. Thank you guys. Well, super excited to hear that the regional went well. So just to kind of finish this before we turn it over to Jenny, if Maria and the other organizers are here, I just want to confirm the schedule just so it's not confusing for folks, just because I want to double check. So it looks like our content tracks kick off today at 2:30 Eastern time. Is that right, Maria and team?
That is correct.
Okay, so actually the schedule, I was talking with Jessica earlier, but my change was incorrect. We actually do have a break from 12 to 1 p.m. So I'm going to put this back in here as break. So this is actually, so
yeah.
Our
I think there's a little confusion because we don't have it in the text part of the schedule. It's in the visual part of the schedule. And I'm not sure it's on the website. So we can do some Slack announcements. We can do announcements in here. Right. But yes, regionals are for everybody. This is our chance to get together as regions. They're important.
Yes, but just in terms of timing. So,
but in terms of timing, all the tracks start at 2:30.
Well, no. So sorry, let's just be very clear for everybody. Yeah. This plenary ends at noon Eastern time.
Yes.
We'll have an hour break from noon to 1 like we do every day. So noon to 1, that we're gonna have a break for an hour. Then the regionals kick off at 1 p.m. Eastern time. Okay, yep. So the regionals kick off and they can be an hour to even like a little more than an hour. So that then we've got a break from about 2 p.m. Eastern time to 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, so the organizers can get set up for their rooms for the afternoon. But we have regionals at 1 p.m. Eastern time. Yes, thank you, Jessica. 1 p.m. Eastern time, and the rooms are mapped properly on the visually on the website. Okay, so 1 p.m. Eastern time, and right here in the Nucleus will be the North American Regional. And let me just double check here. Latin America is going to be in the ribosome. Europe is going to be in the lysosome, and Africa will be in Golgi. Okay, and that's all at 1 p.m. Eastern time, and that is correct on the visual calendar on the website. Okay, so we'll make a few announcements again about that, but just want to clarify that for everybody. Okay.
I just want to say that I think we have workshops starting at 1 today, though.
Good. No, very, very good. Yeah, and that is.
It'll be the open yeast collection is at 1, and then at 2 we have how do we categorize the world. So those are some overlaps with regionals.
Okay, good.
Unfortunately.
No, but no worries. Yeah, so let's if you guys don't mind. Organizers, let's just blast that out also on the Slack and just make sure that's very clear to everybody. So workshops kick off at 1, regionals also kick off at 1. All right. Yes. Clarity. Okay, good. Any other quick reflections from the day yesterday before we turn it over to Jenny? Anybody want to share?
Party was amazing and the DJing was fantastic.
Yeah, the party was crazy, everybody. So for those of you that missed it, the party went until about 1:30 a.m. Eastern time. We had we basically, like, after everybody got tired dancing, we shifted into slow jams with Nora, and we were all in bed listening to music as like Nora just like kind of gently got us to sleep for those of us that were sleeping. And yes, the open mic was super crazy amazing. Jana, thank you for sharing beautiful music. I don't even remember.
And we actually had a lot of babies dancing last night at open mic. Had a lot of little kids dancing as part of BioSummit, and that was really super awesome.
There were lots of babies. My mom made an appearance as well. So there was like intergenerational family dancing. It was pretty exciting. Oh yeah, Rick Fold, my God. Please check the general channel. Shout outs to Patricia for making the most epic protein sequence ever. So check out the Rick Fold.
The LA biohackers joined us and gave us not one, but 2 performances.
That's right. We had some live hip hop from LA biohackers. Oh my God. And then shout outs to Carolyn. The gratitude offering, if you guys missed it, was so beautiful. So we had Hideo Iwasaki from Japan join us and share with us a whole tradition that they have in Japan in their lab, where they make offerings and share gratitude to their lab equipment, to the organisms that they create or do not create. And they have all these rituals and ceremonies around it. It's a really beautiful thing. And then we did our own gratitude offering that again was led by Jean-Luc Pierite, where we had members of each region talk about an animal or an organism that was going extinct. And it was so beautiful. And Carolyn, again, I just want to shout out Carolyn. She did such an amazing job organizing and pulling it together, and it was really, really magical. So for those of you that missed it, sorry that you missed it. It was really great. But certainly, the offer gratitude offering and all that, we'll reshare that on YouTube later on, so you guys can check that out. But with that, everybody, I want to introduce now our first speaker for this morning. So Clayton, if you can help me spotlight Jenny Malloy. We are so honored to have Jenny. So Jenny has been a part of BioSummit, I think, since the very first year. So Jenny is again, I think, one of the major figures in our community and many communities doing open science. She's been helping to organize the GOSH gathering, the Gathering of Open Science Hardware for many, many years, has been building so much infrastructure all around the world globally. Today, again, I think she'll talk quite a bit about the Open Bioeconomy Lab, but Jenny's truly a massive force for open science and has had so many projects. I can't even keep track of all the different things happening with Jenny and her work. So I'm so excited to hear about all the latest that's going on in the world of Jenny Malloy. So everybody, please put your hands together and welcome Jenny Malloy from the UK here with us today.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for the invitation. So yeah, I have been to almost all of the BioSummits. I'm actually going to talk a bit less today about what my lab does, partly because I presented on quite a lot of that last year, and actually due to COVID, kind of we have been doing a lot of stuff, but I think the top sort of highlights are pretty unchanged in terms of what my lab develops. So I'm based at the University of Cambridge, and my group is called the Open Bioeconomy Lab, but we also collaborate extensively with labs around the world, including community labs as well as universities. And we try and create open source toolkits for biologists to do what they need to do. So I think several of you will have seen talks over probably the last 3 BioSummits about the Open Enzyme Collection, which is an open source DNA toolkits. I did a workshop on that yesterday. We're still learning as we go how to do this stuff better and be more open and kind of be more helpful and useful to people. But the sort of philosophy of my lab is basically that we try and produce open source technologies that are used and useful and actually deployed. So we try and kind of run projects that actually then use those toolkits to do something that is going to make a beneficial impact in the world. And so we're very interested in kind of how to go from research and projects to impact, and it's a really tough road. But today I thought I'd talk a bit more about kind of what is an open bioeconomy and how the BioSummit community is already contributing to building one, but how you might want to kind of think about that work. And if anyone is interested to reach out about specifically projects in my lab, you can head on over to openbioeconomy.org and check out what we're doing, and feel free to contact me. But I will start my presentation now, and hopefully this all comes up on screen well. So yeah, today I'll talk about what is an open bioeconomy. So the bioeconomy in general is any set of economic activities that invent, develop, process, use biological products and processes. So we've had a whole track on kind of nature-based work at BioSummit this year and kind of how we kind of use nature in a sustainable way. So it does include all of that. Of course, a lot of us are kind of on the area of the bioeconomy that's a bit more technology focused. So whether it's engineering biology, building out biotech. So it does cover all of that. What I'm going to talk about today is a bit more at the biotechnology end of the bioeconomy, because that's really where my work focuses. But I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of what I mean by an open bioeconomy, and really interested to hear your feedback on whether that chimes with what you think of as an open bioeconomy. So there's 3 points that I'd like to make, because I don't have the entire day to talk to you about it, and I definitely could spend all day. So number one is that an open bioeconomy is open to opportunities and taking risks. So a lot of the work that we try and do is building out toolkits and processes and kind of ways of working that create abundance of resources rather than scarcity, with the hope that this will lead to accelerated innovation, but also accelerated use of kind of technologies that arise from biology. And we'll come on to this in all of these points in more detail. Number two is open to sharing. So thinking about how we share our knowledge and our tools with others, and how we can build out equitable and commons-based governance systems to kind of accelerate progress and try and ease some of the transaction costs of sharing. And thirdly, being open to dialogue. So having some humility about the work that we do, being responsive, expressing solidarity and thinking about sustainability, whether that's sustainability of our own mental health or of our communities or of the environment and kind of society as a whole. So there's a lot of levels to that, but that we really should question and think and inform our decisions in that way. So for me, this is what an open bioeconomy looks like. And I'm just going to step through some of the kind of ways of thinking that inform the work in my lab and with many collaborators, and I know many groups within the BioSummit community as well. So what do I mean when I talk about being open to opportunities and taking risks? Well, a lot of my work addresses the idea that resources for doing biotechnology are not equitably distributed, and I know that this community feels that strongly in a great sense. So that's whether that's unequal distribution between, academic institutions and community labs, or most of my work focuses on geographic inequalities. So the challenges of getting hold of the tools to do science in Africa, Latin America and parts of Asia compared to the rest of the world. And so a lot of our work is aimed at actually building out systems for manufacturing using biology. So we focus at the moment on enzymes and enzymes for research, like DNA polymerases and other things that those who work in labs will be very familiar with. But we really build out the toolkits and the processes to give people the ability to also manufacture other useful biological proteins. For example, maybe to make high value chemicals, to make biological drugs, to make other things that they want to do. So we think of it more as building out a toolkit that others can take and run with. And one of the key things is that we want to make that biomanufacturing more distributed, because actually the kind of raw material for biomanufacturing, the interesting biology and the genes, they're very distributed. And what we find is that the hotspots for biodiversity, where we find all of this useful biology, are not the hotspots for innovation, often for all sorts of structural and systemic reasons. And so we really want to say that, that future should be for the many and not the few. And really the future is already here. I mean, we've heard about amazing technologies over the last couple of days of BioSummit. And it really is just about making sure that that's cutting edge biotech and synthetic biology and bioengineering and other forms of biology is better distributed. So just a few kind of telling us what we already know slides, but as an example of things not necessarily being very evenly distributed, this is an example of COVID-19 innovation, so where tests were being developed. This is early, so this was published in sort of earlier in 2021, so it's not reflective of the current situation, but you can see that there's obviously a heavy weighting towards a small number of countries in North America, Europe and China and some other parts of Asia. But there are vast regions of the world where there was limited published diagnostic innovation. So that's a challenge. The innovation landscape is not equal, and that's reflected in the academic record as well. So if you look at 24,000 papers containing synthetic biology, just over 1,000 of those are from low and middle income countries. I excluded China from that because China are actually the third largest publisher of synthetic biology papers and are still classified as a middle income country, but are a slightly different situation to others. So there's a kind of inequality in the academic record. And we also see that reflected in industry. So this is an example of the export of laboratory reagents. And you can see that pretty much it maps onto the same graph as the diagnostic innovation. So we're also seeing that like the manufacturing and the industry are also skewed and not very even across the world. However, there's a real opportunity. So of around 40 million patents in the world, only around 1% have been registered in the global south. So this actually gives a lot of like freedom to operate from a legal perspective, talking about openness for companies and researchers to actually use technologies for useful purposes. But there are big challenges in kind of getting access to that knowledge in a way that's translatable and also moving forward with actually doing the research itself. So a lot of the thinking that we have in my lab is around how to reduce dependency of low resource settings on high resource settings. So how do we spread the abundance and kind of level up and create a more even playing field? And an interesting essay that some of you may want to read about this is actually from 1990, so it's quite a while ago, from a Beninese philosopher called Paulin Huntonji, and he talks about different ways in which Africa at that time, and unfortunately still today, was dependent on the global north for multiple things, including scientific research funding. Again, unfortunately, that pattern hasn't really changed. There's still a lot of research that's led through kind of donor and external funding, which can sometimes skew research agendas. But he really talks about the importance of kind of having the experimental machinery to do science, as well as the means to collect interesting samples and to analyze data, but really to be able to do that middle bit of kind of processing and interpretation. And he talks about the importance of having like the ability to produce the means of production. In his case, he's talking about producing research instruments, but in my group, we think about producing enzymes, because often for molecular biology, having reagents are the means of production. So producing reagents gives you access to be able to produce more data, to produce more innovation much faster and at lower cost. And if you have that, it gives you the opportunity to take more risks. And that's really kind of what we see in an open bioeconomy, being an environment where researchers and innovators can take more risks and not be concerned about what that means for their resources, not having to kind of schedule the last microliter of TAC for each experiment, but to have this kind of abundance. And this has a real impact on kind of people's lives as scientists and how they self-identify, and kind of it goes beyond just the kind of pragmatic aspect and into how people feel. So there's a couple of quotes here from papers, one looking at a Senegalese laboratory and how the lab being unable to kind of replenish its stocks and kind of reactivate equipment that are broken was really kind of associated with the lab feeling that things were not moving as fast and they kind of weren't able to be innovative, and that life was just not as fluid anymore, and they kind of lost the tempo of their work. And then also I love this quote from Aruka Okoke, where she talks about how, you know, not having facilities to do kind of basic science and really, you know, expand on hypothesis-driven research is really a debate about who can dream and where. So it's not just about kind of prosaic and kind of boring lab equipment, but it really has profound implications for what science is being done by whom and where in the world. So one of the things I put to the Biosummit community is have a think about how is your project increasing opportunity and decreasing or reducing dependency. And so some of the ways that we can kind of enable opportunities are through collaboration and co-creation in an equitable way. And that presents a coordination challenge. We all know it's difficult to coordinate people and things. Navigating resources and power, different levels of resources. You want to kind of not replicate the current power inequalities, but they do exist. So we have to kind of acknowledge them and move forward. And also documentation is really hard. I did a workshop yesterday about our open enzyme collection and fully acknowledged like we produce these toolkits, but as many of us, our project is, you know, under-resourced for the ambition of the project itself. And we have a lot to do to make those collections more useful for people who are coming in fresh and don't maybe have a full background in molecular biology, or just don't have the time to kind of dig through documentation. But documenting know-how is really tough, but it's absolutely essential for having this kind of producing these opportunities. And yeah, again, reducing dependencies. So production of the means of production, is knowledge being passed on without the means for someone to kind of replicate it and move forward? Are we considering succession and kind of the end game of our projects? What do we want to achieve, and how are we tracking our progress towards that? And how do we balance local autonomy and globalization? We think a lot about supply chains, and this is really tough because my group kind of really is about distributed manufacturing. We want to understand the impact of distributed manufacturing and local kind of autonomy and local production of things, but also ultimately when we get PCBs, we still buy them from China, and there's kind of a whole bunch of globalization stuff that needs weighing up in terms of its impact. So being open to sharing is the second part of an open bioeconomy. And a lot of what my group does is try to produce things that have universal access. The availability of specific molecular tools unencumbered by intellectual property. And there's a whole way of kind of doing that, which many people in the BioSummit are very well versed in. So if anybody is thinking of releasing their project under an open source license and wants some input on what license to choose, how it all works, there's a ton of people here, and also in the Gathering for Open Science hardware community that David mentioned, that you can reach out to and can really help you do the universal access piece from a legal perspective. I guess the point I want to make is that often that's sort of necessary, but it's not usually sufficient to make these things really, really useful and create a properly open bioeconomy, because of all the stuff that is needed to be added onto that. So for example, know-how. One very topical example is vaccines. So there's been a big push to make vaccine patents more open so that low and middle income countries can manufacture them. But just making the patent open, yeah, again, necessary, but entirely insufficient to actually enable that manufacturing to happen, because the amount of technical support and know-how required is so huge. And I've been working a lot on the same kind of problem, but for diagnostics, which I'll come back to later. And yeah, it's a real issue. So we also are interested in universal participation, how to get greater involvement of stakeholders, and collaborative production as well. So I guess the question I wanted to throw out to the BioSummit community is think about how open you should be to build a better bioeconomy. And that doesn't mean automatically choosing one route or another, but really questioning your projects and your value proposition and what your mission is, and how openness can play a role in doing that. So open source approaches can be super good for accelerating R&D because you're reducing friction in access to the knowledge. Open science is a wonderful thing. It can be really helpful if you're expecting user innovation. So this is why, you know, I'm so excited to see what people do with open enzyme toolkits, because for sure it's going to be stuff I never thought about. And also focusing, it frees you up to focus on your value add. So maybe it is providing that know-how, maybe it's kind of building out trust in your technology, and having collaborations and community is super important. Sometimes it's not possible to do open source, and I know a number of BioSummit community members have encountered this as well. If you need a whole bunch of money over many, many years, you probably need to find someone to fund that, and Monopoly is quite effective at generating profits, so it's often quite tough if you're taking something through to scale to keep it open all the way through. There are some notable exceptions. For example, OpenTrons have managed this, from what I can tell, pretty well with the OpenTrons robots, that the kind of software and designs are still openly available, but they have recently closed a $200 million funding series. So it's not that you can't do it, but it is a challenge. Sometimes you might need to defend or control. Some projects use patents and other kind of protections to maintain values vector distribution in a few cases, which you can ask me about at the end, because I realize I'm running out of time. And if it won't be used, it's a lot of effort to document something. And the same is true of open research data as well. It's usually stated that, you know, we should try and be intelligent about where we put efforts into documenting data, because not all data is equally useful. But having said that, you run the risk of, you know, not producing something someone else has a great idea for. So I really like this Stanford Social Innovation Review article called What's Your End Game, which I would recommend if you're doing kind of stuff as a social enterprise, or with even as a non-profit, to have a read of it, because it kind of really goes through in terms of like resources that you might need, some of the ways to think about your future. So for example, you can see here on this graph, if you achieve your mission, then you don't need any more money. So that's great. Open source can be a way of kind of maintaining something with less input of revenue or funding, because people, you know, your users are also your developers, for example. But I think you really have to think about what you want to achieve and where open fits within that. And finally, being open to dialogue. This is not really my area of expertise, so I'm going to brush over it quite quickly, because there are people in the room who have much more experience with talking to stakeholders and kind of being open to dialogue. But I have had a lot of experience over the last 18 months in getting pulled into policy conversations. And I remember from last year's Biosummit an amazing talk by Linda Gelman, whose name I may have pronounced incorrectly, who was advising her government in Latin America on COVID-19 diagnostics, and kind of took that transition basically through tweeting at health minister, I think I recall, and getting kind of invited to give advice. And so I think in terms of being open to dialogue, look out for opportunities to engage in conversations. Many of you are much more experienced with co-creation and working with communities than I am, and doing a social organizing piece, but it's so key. I think if we're taking pragmatic action towards creating the bioeconomy that we want to see, there's definitely an element of technology, and you know, this community is really good at that. But I'd say that the good governance and the social organizing pieces are actually where the impact happens, and the technology is often not the hard part of doing all of this and making a real impact in the world. And I think Biosummit is a fantastic community to share strategy and tactics around all of that, because you guys, well, we collectively, I would say, are the experts. I know about some pieces, but I'm always learning when I come to this meeting about other ways of doing organizing, other ways of kind of getting impact through policy routes, through civil society, through other means. So yeah, try and get yourself into policy dialogues or talk to people who can. One of the key points that we try and make around the work of the Open Bioeconomy Lab is you can create pragmatic solutions for scientists on the bench, but if their concerns and their needs are not fed up to policy, and there's a ton of governments making bioeconomy policies right now, then those bioeconomy policies are not really going to be fit for purpose. But likewise, the kind of people making the policy really need to be kind of feeding back and having this dialogue. So that's why, in a sense, our work is somewhat split. So we kind of produce the toolkits, but we also work at quite a high level, thinking about how we create the structures that can really take those innovations through. And so I've been working a lot over the last 18 months with the UN Technology Access Partnership, which wrapped up at the start of the year, but I'm now chairing a kind of spin-off group from that on diagnostics, which features the World Health Organization. Been working advising the World Health Organization's COVID technology access pool around diagnostics and how we take innovations through to manufacturing in low and middle income countries. Similarly with the access to COVID-19 tools accelerator. This is a completely new world for me. I did not work with any of these multilateral type of agencies before, and really been interested in engaging also with civil society and advocacy groups like Médecins Sans Frontières and others. And so I'd recommend, if anyone gets an opportunity to get involved with any of these, or to kind of give your voice to people that are already involved, reach out, because it's really worth doing. It's slow and it's sometimes frustrating, but I feel like, you know, very, very slowly things are shifting. And we've seen, you know, after 18 months, or well, yeah, over a year now of pretty hard work, we're finally seeing some stuff coming through the pipeline for diagnostics, which unfortunately I hoped would be announced by now. But, but anyway, there are things happening, and that's quite exciting. It just feels a bit like treading through treacle when you're doing it. I think also, if you have any opportunities to engage with putting out there questions around the progress towards an open bioeconomy and the values that the Biosummit community cares about. This community has a great shared statement of purpose, and trying to feed that into other channels to really get our view on how the world should be out there, I think is important. So I've been a member for the last year of a World Economic Forum Council on synthetic biology, and we just published a briefing paper on how well synthetic biology has been embedding values like sustainability and equity and solidarity into its advancement as a field. And so, you know, it's not necessarily got all of the messages that some of us would have liked to get in, because it's written by a large number of people. But I think trying to really kind of build those questions is super important as well for staying open to dialogue. And I appreciate I've taken two really high level examples here. I think being open to dialogue directly with communities and talking to the people who the bioeconomy really impacts is extremely important too. and it's not my area of expertise, and that's why I'm so excited to be part of the BioSummit community. So I'll just wrap up and say that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour around kind of what I feel that open bioeconomy is, and how I think my group is contributing, and how I think I'm contributing in small ways. But yeah, I'd encourage you to figure out what an open bioeconomy means for you and your work, and help build it, and kind of work together with other BioSummit community members to figure out the most effective ways, because that is definitely still something all of us are working on together. I think no one has the right answer, but there's a whole ton of really super interesting experiments and exciting projects going on. And so I really hope we can kind of learn to do open better and more smartly, and kind of, it's a means to an end, right? We all want to see a better world and a better bioeconomy contributing to a more equitable society, to better sustainability of the environment. And so it's figuring out how kind of different forms of openness can really get us there. And that's me. I will stop. Happy to take any questions, and always feel free to contact me. That's my email address and Twitter handle. And yeah, and if I'm on any of these kind of committees or channels that you think you have an important message that you want to get out, I'm very happy to have a conversation. So just get in touch. And thank you very much.
All right, everybody, can we please give a round of applause and thanks to Jenny Molloy for just a really, really incredible talk. Jenny, we actually have a bunch of time still for questions and just hanging out. So so let's definitely open this up and have a discussion. Hold on.
Yeah, I tried to keep it short so we could chat.
Yeah, perfect.
I'm glad that worked.
No, absolutely. Yeah, we've got a solid five plus, maybe even close to 10 minutes where we can chat. So yeah, so we've got a bunch of questions already in the chat. So please feel free to just raise your hands if you would like to, and then I'll call on you to unmute. But John Allan, do you want to start? You've got a great question here to kick us off.
Sure, thanks. Awesome talk, Jen. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I just wondered about, you're talking about how you've been sitting on the World Economic Forum councils and things like this. How did you first make that connection and build those relationships with those groups?
So the World Economic Forum Council, I applied. So they actually have a fellowship scheme. So I put in my application and got accepted, which is great. So sometimes there are these opportunities if you find them. I actually uncovered it really late, like I found it about a day before the application was due in. But that's been really interesting. And we've really tried to centre. I mean, I should say that one of the co-chairs of the council is also a great friend of the BioSummit, Megan Palmer. And a number of other people who are very, very familiar. We've just we actually had our term extended, which meant we could invite more people. So Megan Lizarazo from iGEM has just joined. So we've really, the council is fairly well stocked, I would say, with people who have this kind of interest in values-driven synthetic biology, and that was kind of baked in from the start. So it was very exciting. Other things like the UN stuff. Yeah, it was a bit of a roundabout way, I think, because it actually arose because I got involved with early on in the pandemic, working with a group who generated the Open COVID Pledge. So this was basically a patent pledge mechanism for companies to allow their technologies to be used. It wasn't totally open. I mean, there are some of us on the committee that would have liked to see more, but we tried to produce a pledge that we felt large companies could sign up to with minimal faff, so not months of talking to lawyers, and it worked. I mean, we had IBM, Microsoft signed up, we had a bunch of mostly tech companies, Facebook signed, so it ended up with a pool of over 500,000 patents that were pledged. And basically the company said, if you find anything in these patents that you can use for COVID-19, you go ahead and use it, we don't mind. But it was time limited, so it was kind of like for the period of COVID-19, so it wasn't as strong as we might have liked. However, that sort of that became an implementing partner of the World Health Organization COVID Technology Access Pool, and kind of simultaneously I got put in touch with a bunch of people, and so it was sort of right place, right time. But I think also, being in communities like BioSummit and being public online about what you're up to and kind of your sorts of views, and this network is super powerful, and that tends to be how you kind of stumble into these things, and it snowballed from there. And now it's this working group is we're publishing a handbook for local manufacturers of diagnostics in low and middle income countries. We've got a roadmap coming out. UNDP and WHO are working on a regulatory mapping. MSF produced a policy brief with input from the working group, and are now running a whole series of advocacy meetings with governments and development banks. So it kind of like, it sort of spiraled, which is one of the reasons for those who were in my workshop yesterday that the open enzyme collection is not as well documented by now as I might have liked. Yeah, so just be open to opportunity, I would say, and just talk to people, and don't be afraid to just tell people kind of what you think should happen. I suspect that possibly one of the reasons, and I kind of cannot confirm this, that my application for the World Economic Forum Council was accepted was because I was quite clear that I had an agenda for being on the council. And sometimes it's actually helpful, as long as you show that you are open to other thoughts, it's sometimes helpful to have, you know, an agenda and a kind of an open, this is what I want to achieve and this is how to get there, as opposed to a more generic sort of, I want to make the world a better place. But having a means to that end and a kind of clear viewpoint sometimes can be helpful in getting you into these policy arenas, I would say.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jenny.
No worries.
Jenny, that's amazing. Any other quick questions for Jenny? I've got a couple for you, or just maybe like one larger theme. You know, this year and last year at BioSummit, we've spent a bunch of time trying to think about governance as one of our themes. And so we actually did a little co-creation governance exercise both this year and last year, which I'll share a little bit of an update about in a moment. But I'm curious, Jenny, just like your kind of thoughts on governance structures, right? I think, you know, from the first day's plenary, you know, Marshall Gans talked a lot about the idea of structure, not that we should try not to view that word as restraint, but actually as construction, like a way to actually enable positive action. So I'm curious, you know, just given the myriad work that you're doing, you know, if you could just talk a little bit about governance structures you've seen for communities like ours that could be, you know, could be useful.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky because a lot of people are hesitant to have any structure, but it really does help to have a route. We actually, the Gathering for Open Science Hardware just went through basically a year-long governance exercise where we had a governance working group that was meeting every couple of weeks and thinking about, yeah, what's the sort of minimal viable governance structure that we can put in place in order to efficiently make decisions as a community. And this is actually a precursor governance group, so they were putting in place what we needed to seat a longer term governance structure, which has ended up being an elected community council. That wasn't kind of given from the start, that sort of emerged from the discussions. But yeah, I think just having a way where, you know, it's transparent to everybody that you know who is making decisions and how they're making them, and how you can influence them if you can, and not to be afraid that some decisions, I mean, some decisions just have to be made by small groups of people ultimately. And this is one of the bigger challenges that I have in my work, is kind of trying to balance like community governance with corporate governance and legal entities that also have to govern themselves, whether that's a university where you can sometimes be pretty constrained about what you can do, or even a non-profit. I mean, I'm on the board of now 2 non-profits. I was on 4, but I've just stepped down from 2. And yeah, it's really tough because there are legal responsibilities that you have, which sometimes don't match very well with a community governance structure or consensus driven agendas and kind of all the things that we, you know, like to practice, but ultimately, so there's kind of a level of pragmatism that you have to have. And I think I'd recommend anyone who's sort of thinking about this to definitely reach out to other communities. There are also just kind of people who have encyclopedic knowledges of governance structures. We were fortunate in Gosh to have the help of Allan Gunn from Aspiration Tech. Gunnar has helped a whole bunch of tech nonprofits. He's worked heavily with Mozilla, with OpenStreetMaps, with a whole bunch of, like, he gets open, he gets open communities, and he also is a governance geek. So I think that has really helped to have that sort of person. And I think those people exist within the BioSummit community and elsewhere. And it can sometimes help to have a somewhat more impartial person come in and kind of like be that facilitator as well. Yeah. So I'd recommend that. And I think it's just no one size fits all. And people, I think I would caution though against like experimenting too much because there's certain decisions which it's difficult to back out from, and there are certain decisions that can be changed later. And I think a lot of people get too kind of held up on the fact that you can't change the governance structure later on, and you absolutely can. There are just certain things that are really difficult, and for those ones, like, you know, deciding what type of legal entity you're going to set up are quite difficult to reverse. But other stuff you can go back, and one of the points I try and make about a lot of the work that we're doing, is the current system of governance for science, even like thinking big, of how we govern how we do science, how we fund science, how we publish science, and also the whole mechanism of like how we deal with international trade and international aid. Like all of this is being constructed by humans and ultimately some of those decisions can be rolled back. And so I think that's another reason to not both at a small level in community governance and a big level of kind of global governance, don't feel like stuff is shut in stone. It may be, particularly at the global level, it takes a decade to unpick what was done, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. So just kind of be open and put in place what you think is the minimal amount to get stuff done, and move from there. Don't get caught up in months and months and months or years of sort of trying to find the perfect model.
Yes.
Try and set up a flexible platform. That would be my take home from the last 12 months of governance work.
I love that flexible platform. That's a really, really great take home. Jenny, we'll have to stop there, but again, I think you're on the Slack as well. So for this governance conversation too, we have got a governance channel around that. I think a huge amount of what Jenny's work has been proliferating also in the workshops channel and also in the global collaborate. We have also the global collaborations and sharing digital artifacts, digital and physical artifacts channels. So, so Jenny, if you are willing to, hang out in those Slack channels a little bit, I'm sure people will continue to have questions for you there as well. So
yeah.
So everybody, yeah, just again, Jenny, thank you so much for the incredibly inspiring talk. Your work really helps to make us all believe that another world is possible. So everybody, can you join me in giving one more round of applause to Jenny Malloy? Thank you so much, Jenny. Okay, everybody, so we're gonna move right on into our next speaker. So Clayton, if you can help me spotlight Thomas Landrain from Just One Giant Lab JOGL. It is a real pleasure to have Thomas join us here. Thomas has been also part of the BioSummit since the very first iteration. And, for me, just on a personal a personal note, I think it's been just so incredible to watch just the evolution of JOGL over, I think you presented about JOGL actually at the very first BioSummit. So it's like literally seeing it kind of, start out as just this idea and sort of the initial work that was happening there. And, Thomas like hustling and flying over to Cambridge to meet with his, Cambridge in the US, to meet with his co-founders and building an initial code for the site and so on, to all of just the incredible activity that's happening as a part of JOGL now. It's been a real big evolution. And I think, having Thomas, you be a part of BioSummit and have that, kind of really publicly for all of us to be involved and both in helping to, work on JOGL, but then also just seeing this evolution over the years has been so incredibly inspiring. So again, Thomas Landrain has been a big figure in the larger open science movement in the life sciences with LAPIS previously, and a number of other startups, and of course JOGL most recently in the past few years. So Thomas, we're so excited to have you, and just to say too for everybody, there's going to be a whole special session about JOGL later in the Responding to COVID-19 track. So I think we'll have 3 hours where JOGL community members are going to be helping to lead a session there. So please do check that out as well. And so without further ado, everybody, please join me in welcoming Thomas Landrain.
Thank you so much, David. It's such a pleasure to be back this year again at the BioSummit. I mean, this is such an inspiring community, and I mean, the DIY bio community overall has been such a life-changing experience for me, who was a researcher originally, but looking at how, communities like this one is able actually to change, the way we perceive science, innovation, we can have an impact, has truly, made me make life-changing choices. And I hope that everything that we're doing right now is going to inspire way more people to do the same. And so I'm going to share my screen there. Let's see how it works. Does it work?
It works.
Excellent. All right. So my talk is going to be about community-driven science innovation, because it's what we do here is basically this: is how do we get very diverse kind of people from different places of the world who share a similar passion to work efficiently together. And so we live a very special moment, because so communities are something that are they're not new. It's a natural way for people to organize. But thanks to the internet, we have a way actually to gather people like what we are just doing right now in a much bigger way. And this completely changed actually the way we can create value. And so, when you look back at how science innovation was kind of structured, you needed campuses. You needed physical places to gather talents and resources together. That's why university campuses were created in the first place. But thanks to the internet, I mean, it's not the case anymore. You can share resources very easily. You can give access to documents, to data. You can meet people who can be your coworkers, your collaborators, and they don't have to be close to you. And so this is really life-changing. And so the question is how do we benefit as much as possible from these digital technologies to push the open science and open innovation agenda? And so, we already have the open laboratory revolutions on the way. The Fab Labs, the community biolabs, and it's a growing number. It's always fascinating to see, new initiatives getting up. And so obviously we need way more. But physical spaces, it's a different dynamic than from actually trying to create a global collaboration. And so, as David mentioned, before working with JOGL, I was myself a biohacker space builder. And so I built La Paillasse in Paris. But when you have a physical space, you mostly focus on your local community. And I always found it hard to create collaboration with other laboratories, not even in France, but also, in the US, for example, or, in Asia, in South America. And so it was, always kind of frustrating. And so trying to research about how we could make this happen. And so after a few iterations, we came up with JOGL. And what we're trying to solve here mostly is an accessibility issue, as you have not only in the DIY bio community, but in the world in general, you have the people who are given access to resources to do projects, or are in the position that they would like to lead a project. They could be researchers, entrepreneurs, civil servants, or activists. But even for them, it can be difficult to initiate anything. They have to ask permission. They have to find collaborators. They have to follow the complicated routes. And then on the other side, you have people who are not legitimate enough yet, somehow, to work by themselves, to initiate something, which can be very hard. And so those are the students, the professional, the free time, patients, citizens. And so how do we bring those people together, and we give them the capacity to take initiatives much more easily. So that's really the motto of Just One Giant Lab is, if we can successfully bring people from all over the world who has the will to collaborate and build, commons, so scientific commons and technological commons, what can we do? It really opens up opportunities and possibilities. It's really, for me, it's very fascinating. And so at the end, it's about how do we build this giant community? And a giant community who has the ability to solve almost anything, because it must be highly interdisciplinary. So by connecting people who are not normally connecting with each other. So what you need is for that, two different kind of things. You need a digital infrastructure and a social infrastructure. And so we've been experimenting on that with JOGL for the last couple of years. The first, I'm going to introduce a bit what we did with the digital infrastructure. So just as a reminder, JOGL is a non-profit organization based in Paris, and really everything we do is open source. So first, if you go on the platform, you'll find actually a way to navigate through complex networks of projects, collaborators. Nowadays we have about 7,000 members on the platform, about more than 400 projects. But also we we introduced recently last summer JOGL spaces, where for communities and organizations to create their own space where they can animate their own community. But ultimately the goal is obviously to offer the infrastructure, the JOGL infrastructure for existing communities, but also as we get more communities to be hosted over to JOGL, we can get those communities to talk to each other, and we can create critical mass, which is so important. And so it's we have some very interesting organizations joining JOGL right now, and I would love actually to spark also a discussion about, should we create a Biosummit community space on JOGL, but not only even for the Biosummit community. Like you probably have yourself communities, or you would like actually to create a community lab on something that would like not only run on a physical space but maybe on the digital space. So it's I think this is a perfect place for us to have this discussion. And so if you want to have this, I'm not going to have it right now, but in the JOGL session, we may actually have it. So please contact us for that. We also, because we have access to a lot of data coming from projects, so everything on the platform is open. And so you can, through APIs, extract anything you want. But also we can use this data to create recommendations. So when you go on the platform, we're going to know about what are your skills, your interests, or like the project you've been working with, or the communities you've been interacting with. And so we'll be able actually to recommend you, people to look at, projects, activities, and stuff like that. So, at the end, it's really how do we create this global infrastructure for anything related to open science and open source innovation, basically to the commons in the world. And so we create that critical mass again, and we create more serendipity, and we crush the silos somehow. The one thing that is also very useful is that anything that is on the platform, as I was telling you, can be extracted. So if you want actually to take whatever information is on the like your projects or the members of your community, and you want to make them appear on your own website, well, you can do that very easily. I'm going to talk a bit more about the digital infrastructure a bit later on, about a very specific module that we are currently implementing. But first, now I would like to talk more about what we've been doing to animate the global community, and by developing different kind of program, experimenting about how we can actually make the collaboration more efficient, not just using a platform, because the platform is not enough. And so the point is really about to keep everything scalable, because if to have a successful community of, let's say, 1,000 members, if you need to have like 100 animators, that's not going to work. You're never going to scale. And so everything that we try to think about how we want to build the JOGL infrastructure is about scalability. And so this is something that we've been experimenting a lot during the COVID pandemic, and I'm going to give you more data about that. But basically, this is the current schematic, like the current process that is happening within JOGL, is that you have members, you have organizations, and they all bring funding, they bring assets, expertise, facilities, and this is given as a support to projects that have been evaluated by the peers, by your peers, by the community, and openly. And so this evaluation process is actually really at the heart of everything that is happening in terms of social animation within JOGL. And I think this is really can spark like a new age of maturity for communities in general, because it's going to help everyone to get feedback from each other in a formal way, to get validation, to get legitimacy, to get access to resources in a legitimate manner. So also in an iterative process. So the best way actually to introduce these processes to talk to you about, to get through you, to get you through the Open COVID-19 initiative. So this is something that we started back in February 2020, and at first it was just to create an open source DIY diagnosis test. And because we knew a little about the COVID pandemic, about the numbers, and so we gathered like this a small group of people who grew quite big, and at some point it went overboard, and now people wanted actually to work on treatment, other kind of prevention technologies, and also diagnostics, and so it's been really a test bed for JOGL, literally, and so. To give you a sense of what happened during that program is that we basically mobilized a bit more than 4,000 people, but about 1,500 were active, and they created more than 150 projects. And so we didn't know what to do at first, like, because there was so many good ideas, and we could clearly see that what was missing was just a little bit of money. You know, we didn't want the members to go into their pocket money, and knew that, you know, this would restrict so much the potentiality of their ideas. And so we reached out to a couple of foundations, and they gave us a grant money. We are very thankful for them, especially the AXA Research Fund. And so we provided overall about 120,000 euros to the community. But we did that in a way that we didn't want JOGL to be responsible to choose who is worth and who is not. And so we created this open peer review process. And it was the community directly who was basically through a collective intelligence process that was deciding what was the best initiatives at the moment. So I'm going to get into more details about this process in a minute, but just looking at the numbers, and to also to take some of Jenny's messages about how open actually brings efficiency in science innovation is, so here with just 120,000 euros, we got so 36 projects to be supported, and out of those 36 projects, 10 papers were published in peer-reviewed journals, and 22 functional solutions were created. That's like, you know, way more than what you would normally find in a normal grant in terms of efficiency. You know, 120,000 would be actually just for one project. Also, 42% of the projects were led by women, which is also actually a much higher number of what you would normally find in normal innovation or scientific tracks. And also, you know, the leaders of projects were actually from four different continents in 19 countries. So very high diversity, and also not only diversity in terms of gender and localization, but also in terms of experience. We funded projects, you know, realized by researchers, but also by high schoolers. Like, for example, a project in Seattle done by high schoolers they created a simulation model to see how the COVID-19 was propagating through schools and universities building, and so thanks to that, actually, I mean, before the macro grant they got from JOGL, they couldn't actually get heard by anybody in Seattle, but because they got legitimized by this open peer review process, and they got access to funding, and they could make a proof of concept, that completely changed actually the dynamic. And so where I want to go here is that basically what JOGL has played for them is being kind of like an institution. It's like we provided them a title. You know, it's like when you're a researcher from Harvard or MIT, you get that title, and so people are going to trust you. You know, but if you're, let's say, you know, if you're not part of an institution, how are you going to do? You know, how are you going to get heard by others? And so that's where JOGL can come in and play this kind of like new kind of institutions for communities, where through this collective process, where it's not JOGL deciding, but really the community deciding, like, who is actually doing something great and needs to be supported, that legitimacy is being built and can be used by the chosen projects. So that is really powerful. And so this open peer review process is really interesting, and we've done it 5 times because it's been an iterative process, and so there were rounds about every 3 months, something like that. And even if you didn't get it at the first time, you could get it at the second time, through improving your projects through feedbacks. But what I want to stress here is that this is a very scalable process and very robust. In fact, we are going to we almost finished analyzing all the data from the peer reviews, so that we are going to publish a methodological paper on that specifically in a couple of months. And so what makes it scalable is that first of all, for a project to be elected, as reviewed, it needs to be reviewed by at least 5 reviewers, and so reviewers have access to a form, of 30 questions, and out of those 30 questions, we extract scores. There is a feasibility score, and there is also an impact score. And if your scores are above the quality threshold, which was 3.5/5 for open COVID-19, then automatically your project is validated and you get access to the microgrants that you asked. You also get feedbacks from the reviewers, and so in the case that, for example, your project didn't make it, you can use those feedbacks to improve it. Everything is transparent except the name of the reviewer. So reviewers are anonymous, which we know makes the review process more robust in that case. Also, what makes this scalable is that the applicants are not just a client of the system, meaning that they don't just apply with a project waiting to be evaluated and to get money, from JOGL. What happens is they need to be reviewers themselves. They need to actually bring in collective value. So they have to review actually 4 or 5 projects at least, in order for their own project to be able to go through the evaluation process and be elected. And so that means that as the number of projects increases, the number of reviewers increases too. And so we're never going to run out actually of reviewers. And if an external reviewer wants to join in, they need also to review at least 5 projects, in order for the reviews to be taken into account. So this is how the results of open peer review looks like. You see the feasibility score, the impact score, you have the cutoff, and you can see the projects with their score, etc. So really, like, the whole thing is really made fully transparent. And nobody here, like, not a single person is responsible for any decision here. It's really a collective process. And so which make it very robust. And so we're going to, this is just to give you a sense of what's going to appear in a couple of months. This is the paper we've been working on that really shows that this open peer review process is actually as robust, if not even more, than the peer review process that we will find in the European Commission, for example. Except that this is really transparent and it's scalable and adaptable for communities. So this is very exciting. So at JOGL, we host programs. We develop programs and we host programs, and as a way actually to stimulate collaboration around different kind of subjects. And so we either actually create them ourselves in-house, or we actually create them with partners. And so Epidemium is an example where it's been created with partners. It's about cancer. I'm just putting that here because if you're interested in working around open data in cancer, this is a great opportunity for you to find collaborators or to put in your ideas. The other very exciting thing that I wanted to touch on is, and we're going to get more room to talk about that, which is very, very exciting. Probably one of the biggest news that I get to talk about in the recent time, is that with iGEM, the iGEM Foundation, we've been working on the creation of an open biosafety and biosecurity framework for independent scientists. What do I mean by that? Is that we've seen too many times that open bio projects, it's not easy actually to understand. Even for myself, sometimes when I was working in LabBIAS, if my protocol, if my measures regarding biosafety and biosecurity are robust, are good. And so, especially for projects that are done outside institutions, we want to offer this as a service, as a free service, where any projects will be able to apply to get reviewed, but not only by biosafety and biosecurity experts, but also by the community. And the goal really is going to have project well documented, and once they actually get validated by the community and by experts, they become also standards, like they become model for others to follow and to understand, what they need actually to use or to adapt, etc. And so we really want to create also this library of open biosafety and biosecurity standards that can be followed by the community. And later on, why not also to make this process also standard for the community, where if you're not sure about if your project is safe or not, you can just go through that process and get validated, by the community and by experts. So I think this is a very exciting moment also for the community, and this is something we're going to launch beginning of next year, January, February. And we want to have an open discussion about that with you during our JOGL session starting at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. So please be here if you're interested by those problematics. This can be very, very exciting. The other subject that has been going on, and Martin has been touching it yesterday during his talk, is that as we've seen projects during Open COVID-19 getting at levels of maturity that were really high, especially, for example, the diagnosis test. We struggled at some point when we reached a plateau where we had the proof of concepts, but we really had a hard time to figure out how to bring those proof of concepts, that were really robust in terms of experimental data to the market, because we had to go through processes that are not done for community project. They are done for large companies or startups that have raised capital, and so it's really an open discussion that we're currently having about, okay, what do we need, what kind of tools, what kind of partners. And so if you're interested also in helping us build this pipeline, to bring healthcare product, especially open source healthcare products that are done by independent scientists to the global marketplace, please join us also at the Ribosome at 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. The one of the last thing I wanted to talk about is that JOGL is it's a neutral infrastructure that we are developing to be provided to any communities around the world, and so we have started building also regional chapters. So that we have local teams working with local communities, and the first of those regional chapters is JOGL Africa that we've launched for a bit more than 6 months now, and so if you are interested in joining the effort and meeting other individuals from Africa that are developing open science and open innovation projects, please check that out. And we also have our first community initiative, which is Africa Against Antimicrobial Resistance. There is a book that has been developed. There is also a collaboration with different laboratories that are working with like developing tools specifically to fight antimicrobial resistance, and like the BioHive, for example. But also there is a macro grant that is going to be provided to some of the best ideas developed around this area, specifically for Africa. And the next event is going to be on the 24th of November. It's going to be a virtual skills camp. And just for you to have an insight about what the JOGL session is going to be, we have 4 parts, and so you have heard of 2 of them so far. The third one is going to be an update on the SARS-CoV-2 diagnostics projects. And the fourth one is going to be a study made by Alex Persman from UPenn and others from UPenn about how the biosafety and bioethics questions were handled during the Open COVID-19 program in JOGL. So that's going to be very interesting for everyone to hear. And obviously, I really want to thank the whole team of JOGL, because what's interesting is that this team is at the image of JOGL. It's a global team. It's in 8 different countries and 4 different continents. And I cannot be more lucky actually of working with these incredible individuals. One more thing is that we recently launched also a new initiative, a new program that we call the JOGL Ambassador Program, where volunteers from different places in the world who are really interested in advancing the agenda of open science and open source innovation in their regional locations, they get the support from JOGL, and they help us also reach out to our local communities. And so those are the ones that joined us very recently, and we are very, very grateful for that. If you are yourself interested in joining as an ambassador, don't hesitate. You can contact us at hello.jogl.io. We'll be very pleased to talk about that. Questions. Thank you so much for listening, everyone.
All right. Everybody, can we all give a big round of applause and some love and some emojis for Thomas Landrain's amazing talk? Woo! Awesome. So we have time for just 1 or 2 questions. Thomas, just again, just totally mind-blowing the work that's been going on. And again, it's really great to see so much of the synergies between all of the different communities that are represented at the BioSummit, but also at JOGL. There's so many familiar faces across all of these different projects and initiatives, which is really great. Do folks want to raise your hands in the Zoom chat if you'd like to ask a question? Or you can write a question in the chat as well, and we can answer there. There's been a lot of activity in the chat, mostly just like JOGL is awesome, but how about some questions? Okay, here's a good one. Victoria's asking if you'll join the European regional meeting. So that's one question, which will be happening later on at 1 o'clock Eastern time.
Sure.
Thomas says yes, he will join. Okay, it looks like Jim, you've got a question here. Did you want to ask your question about the cooperative org and incubated startups? Jim, do you want to unmute yourself and ask?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Go for it.
Yeah. It sounds like that, like with most startups out there, there's a whole ecosystem for tech. I live here in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I can't walk outside without stumbling over a startup or, some kind of a co-working space or something. But what about having some kind of a cooperative setup? I'm not saying exactly like Mondragon, but, something decentralized that could incubate. And I have, some knowledge of Rabobank, which is a fairly decentralized, locally controlled bank, maybe funding. But anyway, I'm just riffing, just thinking about, there needs to be an ecosystem for helping startups get going, helping fund startups, helping them structure, helping them not go rogue and go evil and blah, blah, and so on. So what are your thoughts?
So it's a very good question, because one thing is, so when your project is dedicated to become a startup, usually you have plenty of help, plenty of structure and infrastructure being existent. And somehow our position at JOGL is that a lot of projects, a lot of problems cannot be addressed fully by using the startup approach, because it can be hard actually to build a business model on top of it, like directly. And so that's why communities are so important. And so the idea is that how can we de-risk innovation, so that communities are able to basically do the same kind of work that a startup would do but with much less capital, basically. And so However, so we had a few examples of entrepreneurs that were part of the Open COVID-19 project, and in fact the project I told you about from Seattle, from those high schoolers, it became a startup and they entered an incubator, well, I don't know where they are at the moment, but so I wouldn't, if your path is to be a startup and that you have, you have a team of people that are really focused on the project, then you should be able to figure out like a way for you. The point here is that a lot of the projects being done by the community are done by volunteers and people who cannot actually focus their time entirely. And so building a startup of such a team is very difficult. And so we need to find a different organization, in order to make this happen. And so that's basically what we've been working on with JOGL Feeds.
So everyone, just a reminder again, we're going to have a whole session, 3 hours with JOGL and the community there. So hop over to the ribosome and the responding COVID-19 track to hang out more with JOGL this afternoon. So everybody, can you guys just join me one more time in thanking so much Thomas Landrain for presenting, and then also again join us in the afternoon for a lot more there. So
I'm just going to answer like very fast. That was a question about JOGL in North America. And so I can actually announce it, but we've just created a 501c3 in New York, but it's not official yet, but we're working on it. So if you guys are interested in joining the efforts, we'd be very happy about it.
Okay, alrighty, very cool. And we'll learn more about it later on today. Tomas, thank you so much again. And
thank you so much, guys. It's been an honor.
Awesome, thank you, Tomas. And before we go into the break, I just wanted to turn it over to a few folks just to talk a little bit about the tracks later on today. Xavier Palmer, are you there, Xavier?
Indeed, I am, David. Great to see you.
All right, Xavier. Yeah, can you say a little bit more about what's going to be happening in the Responding to COVID track? In addition to, obviously, we've covered JOGL, but can you talk a little bit about the other items that'll be happening in that track later?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, so right after the break that follows JOGL's block, we have multiple talks starting from 5:30 from additional community bio efforts across the world lasting more than an hour, from India, Pakistan, Nigeria, Japan, and more. We have talks such as Impact of Biopublic Relations in Bio Health Security by Oluwa Damiola Ogunjobi. We have ECLIA, a methodology for determining COVID-19 antibodies by Gary Landsman. Stem Cell Pakistan by Muhammad Atif. We have Project Accessible Genomics by Khalil Carozzo. We have India's Response to COVID-19 Phase 2 by Tanish Kumar. We have YCAM Open Lab 2020, Understanding Living Culture 2 by Kazutoshi Suda. And we have Consumer Surplus, a pilot study by Lucas Potter. Finally, we have a open panel protocol discussion by Dan Wright, and followed by closing. Then afterwards, we lead into a break, followed by our talk at 7. Thank you very much, David. And I'll see you all there.
Right. Thank you so much, Xavier. So pop over into the ribosome, guys, for all kinds of epicness on responding to COVID-19. John Allan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Alrighty, John. Could you talk a little bit about what's going to happen in the global collaborations and sharing physical and digital artifacts track?
Sure thing. Yeah, can I share my screen? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Go for it.
Nice. Patrick made some beautiful slides for it to summarize what we've got. We've got a really packed schedule this afternoon. We've got, oh, can you see my screen? I think my computer's failing. Oh, we've got 3 really exciting panels for you all. We've got, so Patrick's going to lead this bird's eye meta level discussion on what we can learn from successful global collaborative projects. So if you like what Thomas was talking about there, it's another one that you might be keen on. And then we have another one where Jenny will be joining us again on creating and curating the biotechnological commons and thinking about for our community and community bio, the way that we share all of our information and our strains and plasmids and stuff like that, and how we can do that best to serve everyone properly. And then Tim also has a really cool panel about affordable automation, which is going to be really cool as well, with all these wonderful people. And then we're also going to hear from this team that are working on building shipping policy databases for Symbio and community bio as well. So they're trying to pull together all the information that you need to try and ship your stuff to anywhere else in the world. to make that really easy for you. And we also have, we also have at the end Collab Jam. Good plug, Collab Jam again. If you want to publicize your stuff, want to find new collaborators, you can publicize your stuff with a 1 minute little flash talk in Collab Jam as well, or tell people about your project that you want to share with them. And we also have loads of really cool talks as well, interspersed throughout all of that with all these awesome people as well. And then that's it. Yeah. Hope to see you there around the goal, G. Yeah, the FOMO is so real, everybody. So, and finally, one very quick thing before we go into a short break. Tim Dobbs, are you there?
I am here, yes.
All right, so we've been doing some work synthesizing some of the outputs from the governance exercise. And so Tim, you want to just share quickly about how everybody can participate in the next steps?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we did over the past 2 days is do a lot of brainstorming, kind of redoing that governance exercise and kind of figuring out what are the burning questions that we have right now in our community. And what I've done is we went ahead and made a Google form out of that. So it's a lot easier to sort of then synthesize that and turn that into a snapshot. So I will, as soon as I can figure out how to get the chat open, drop a link here into the chat, and I'll put this in the Slack as well. But this is an opportunity to go around and kind of see what the community has already sort of put in as far as thinking about what our questions are and what our answers to those questions are. Here, I'll even share the screen real quick. And so it's just we can kind of make our voice and figure out, well, where's the heat right now? What are we really all thinking about as a community? So there's kind of a block of text on the first page, and then you just jump right in and you can just check the boxes for everything that you agree with. You think, oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, I'm kind of excited about that. So there's lots and lots of brainstorming that we've been doing over the week. Well, feels like a week. It's been 2 days, but it's been packed. And yeah, so we're really excited actually to, if people can go and follow that link and just kind of see where their heads are at right now, so we can kind of get the snapshot of our community right now, and then we'll get to see those results and share that back to the community to really see like what are we doing and what are we thinking right now. And so that'll be really, really exciting. So yeah, if sometime today you have a few minutes, go through, click some checks boxes. It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so I just really want to shout out Tim and the rest of the governance squad that's been so thoughtfully pulling together this exercise. So please do hop in that Google form. No time like the present, although we've been discussing in the chat the nature of the space-time continuum maybe worked at this event somehow. But everybody, why don't we take a 10-minute break? I know we're supposed to start at 10:30, but let's start. We've got a little bit of time at the end. So why don't we take a 10-minute break, and everybody, let's come back at 10:35 Eastern time. And yeah, we'll kick things off with, we have a really crazy session coming up in the next 3 talks. We've got Dr. Susan Blumenthal, who is a former Assistant Surgeon General at the United States and served under 4 presidential administrations, major expert in public health. We've got Pataranutaporn from the Media Lab and Freak Lab in Thailand. And then you're not going to want to miss Lisa Joy from HBO's Westworld to close us out at the end of the day. So come back in 10 minutes, everybody, and we will see you very soon. Thanks, y'all. But everybody, it's such a huge pleasure to kick off our next set of 3 talks and panels and discussions by inviting Dr. Susan Blumenthal to the Zoom here. So Clayton, if you don't mind helping us spotlight Susan. So everybody, again, please Google Susan's resume. It's a very long and impressive resume. But the short version is that, Dr. Susan Blumenthal, she's served under 4 presidential administrations here in the United States, was the former Assistant Surgeon General of the United States, and really one of the world experts in public health. Susan has built so many different initiatives and spearheaded so many different efforts in public health over the years that have made just a massive difference in the United States and around the world. And I think most excitedly, more recently, Susan has joined the Media Lab as a visiting professor, and in addition to her many roles, has been really thinking a lot about the future of public health technology and how we can imagine a multidisciplinary future for public health. So again, I think one of the biggest challenges that we faced during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that has been already discussed throughout today, is the idea that there were so many different silos. There were different disciplinary silos. There were different ways in which we could have been better coordinating between including technologists, policy folks, government officials, creatives, communicators, et cetera. And so one of the big questions for the future is, how do we move forward as a global community that cares very, very much about how to protect ourselves and think about the future of global health. So we could not think of a better person than Dr. Blumenthal to come and join us and to really discuss these very, very important topics with us. So everybody, could you all please join me in welcoming Dr. Susan Blumenthal here to the BioSummit.
Thank you so much. I want to commend the visionary David Kong for his leadership in convening this important summit and for his innovative work in exploring the intersection of health and technology. And welcome, world. I'm so glad to see so many people from different countries who are participating in this very creative and important, timely meeting. I'm going to be focusing though on America's public health and our response to the COVID pandemic. I think many of the issues could be, applied to other countries, but I'm going to take a more domestic perspective, and then we can talk more broadly about the global health issues. Colleagues, as you well know, the coronavirus pandemic has revealed multiple weaknesses in America and the world's public health infrastructure, including the dearth of technology leadership and expertise in the design of public health programs, products, and initiatives. I think that we've seen significant deficiencies. We're exposed in surveillance, testing, contact tracing, public health communications, antiviral and vaccine availability and production, new device development, as well as in the sustainability of the supply chain for medical equipment and resources. We all know that there was this dearth of masks and personal protection equipment for healthcare and other essential workers. Hospitals were overwhelmed. Myriad poorly designed websites equated in a kind of Hunger Games for signing up for vaccines, frustrating tens of millions of Americans. And there has been a rampant politicization of science, creating an infodemic of misinformation about the disease. Also, as we know, there are tremendous inequities globally in terms of availability for vaccines, with only 10% of people in the developing world being vaccinated at this time. This era of past neglect, reflected America's amnesia about the devastating health and economic impacts linked to previous infectious disease outbreaks, including the Spanish flu, smallpox, AIDS, Ebola, SARS, H1N1 flu, and Zika, as well as the striking lack of an investment in building a modern, resilient public health infrastructure fit for the 21st century. This public health crisis also revealed an atrophying in the coordination of programs between government agencies in the United States and globally. And as you know, when the pandemic hit, the US, was withdrawing in the previous administration from WHO and from real involvement with other countries in terms of meeting global health needs. I think the one area where the US was involved in providing leadership, was in the Global Fund to fight HIV, TB, and malaria, and also through the PEPFAR program. But, in other areas, there was a lack of real engagement. I think it also, reflected a lack of investment in prevention. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, once said, prevention is preferable to cure. Yet until the COVID pandemic in the United States was only spending 3% of our nation's $3.5 trillion healthcare budget on government public health programs. So as a result, alarmingly, the major weapons in America's toolbox for battling the coronavirus outbreak when it first emerged were proven public health practices, including social distancing, masking, and good hygiene. These were similar to the tools that we had in 1918 to combat the Spanish flu pandemic. So a century later, the paradox was that in the midst of a scientific and technological revolution, the new powerful tools of the digital age were not being effectively or innovatively applied to address the public health challenges facing us until very recently, with the development of novel mRNA vaccines and implementation of other kinds of initiatives, such as, very late in the pandemic rollout, a texting vaccine location program, that followed in the latter phase of the response. So this lack of integrated technology solutions has also impacted our ability to effectively address the chronic disease pandemic in the US and globally, as well as other concerns, such as the effects of the climate crisis on health. For our purposes, technology is broadly defined from informatics to device development to delivery system solutions. I think another example of the negative impact of the lack of technology expertise at the public health table was the rollout in 2012 of the Affordable Care Act website. We called that healthcare.gov in the United States. It was sort of this was a signature issue for President Obama for purchasing health insurance. But without technologists in leadership positions in the United States Department of Health and Human Services to oversee the project, and with the website design contracted out to several tech companies, major flaws in website design caused it to crash and to be widely criticized. And the result was a setback for health reform legislation at that time. So again, this is sort of more evidence for why we need more technology involvement at the public health table. And I think this is something that David Kong and I have written about in a Boston Globe op-ed published several weeks ago. The pandemic also shone a spotlight on the shameful disparities that exist in healthcare in America. You know, Blacks, Latinx, and Indigenous peoples had 2 to 3 times the infection and death rate as compared to whites, underscoring the urgent need to address structural racism in our society and the urgent need to prioritize equity and inclusiveness in the design and implementation of medical interventions. You see, while America represents 5% of the world's population, 20% of COVID infections and 18% of deaths have occurred in the United States. How could America, the global leader in medicine and technology, have lagged so far behind in an effective response to the coronavirus until recently? Well, as David mentioned, for 2 decades, I served as a health official in the administrations of 4 presidents, including during the anthrax attacks and the H1N1 pandemic. And in 2001, the Secretary of Health and Human Services conference room was transformed into a HEPA-filtered command center at a time, and at that time we lacked a seamless communication system to connect all the public health departments in the country. In response to these public health emergencies, our nation developed an all-of-government response, and we wrote documents that outlined the steps needed for pandemic preparedness. But sadly, these documents appear to have sat on a shelf, not well-funded or adequately rehearsed or modernized. Well, Mark Twain once said, "History doesn't repeat itself, but it tends to rhyme." So we witnessed these same problems again with the COVID pandemic. And while the COVID pandemic put a magnifying glass, I think, on the myriad faults in America's healthcare system, inaccessibility, unaffordability, inequity, fragility, it also revealed just how flexible the system could be in a time of crisis. This once-in-a-century public health emergency has ushered in a once-in-a-generation reimagining of healthcare delivery. And that's what our session today is about, you know, a new era of virtual care and digital services that may actually improve patient experiences and build more resilient public health infrastructure in the years ahead. You see, nearly overnight, virtual visits in America to hospitals and clinics, including community health centers, which serve our nation's most vulnerable patients, surged by more than 50% between January 2020 and 2021. The number of VA, that's our Veterans Administration's health appointments, increased by over 2,000%. Testing for upper respiratory viral illnesses shifted from inefficient and sometimes unsafe settings like crowded waiting rooms where viruses can be transmitted to other patients and healthcare workers to drive-through testing sites. Vaccination sites moved from facility-based to community locations, including football stadiums and pharmacies and local organizations to improve access for hard-to-reach populations. Testing, contact tracing, and new methods of vaccine delivery and distribution have been developed at a rapid pace. Now our challenge is to carry forward these innovations into how care works for patients, to marry public health with 21st century science and technology, and to ensure that this redesign of services will be equitable and accessible for everyone. You see, out of a public care crisis, a healthcare revolution has been born. The pandemic has forced a rapid acceleration in reimagining and implementing digital health services that are decentralized and consumer focused. Out of necessity, we've been re-engineering medical practice with the tools of technologies, creating services that are distributed, bringing care to where patients are, digitally enabled, using text, apps, and telehealth services, and decentralized by giving providers the tools and resources they need to deliver more innovative care. But there are challenges ahead to ensure equity and inclusiveness. Because while the use of virtual services have exploded during the pandemic, their potential to improve healthcare disparities was not uniformly realized. Although 86% of Americans with household income under 30% use the internet, we see many Black and Brown communities, rural towns, and the elderly facing a divide, the digital divide. lack of broadband connectivity, lack of mobile devices, and a lack of digital literacy. Post-pandemic, digital access increasingly will equal healthcare access. And the United States Congress just passed an infrastructure bill that will be providing billions of dollars for new funding for broadband access to address these kinds of inequities, because digital care, as we know, digital access for education are going to be critical as we move forward in the 21st century. So care during and after COVID must address the sociocultural determinants of health. 1/3 of all deaths in the United States are linked to these factors, including poverty, education, lack of education, and structural racism. Decades of scientific research reveal that what matters most in determining a population's health is their income level, educational attainment, and health behaviors, as well as the communities we call home, inclusive of transportation systems, workplaces, schools, air quality, and access to clean water and healthy food. During the pandemic, these factors meant the difference between life and death. So racial and ethnic minorities, as well as those living in poverty, have suffered the worst outcomes. And we see this across the world. But in the United States, we saw Black and Hispanic people dying at more than twice the rate of whites, and 2.8 to 3 times more likely to be hospitalized. And according to the CDC, consequently, even seemingly simple public health guidance about quarantining in place if exposed to COVID-19 became a complex puzzle for many patients when they had to balance recommendations about staying home against foregoing income, the availability of a room to quarantine in, childcare responsibilities, and shopping for food and essential supplies. Public health communications and access to care were not enough to circumvent these barriers to medical services and directly led to the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on our nation's underserved communities. So we need to address in the United States and worldwide the intersectionality of these issues and design health in all policy solutions that address the socio-cultural determinants of health and mobilize all sectors of our societies to respond. This means we shouldn't just take a healthcare experience that isn't working that well in the in-person world and make it digital. Let me just give you an example. America ranks 42nd in life expectancy in the world, and the United States lost 3 years of life expectancy. That's the first time it's happened in a century over the past 3 years, in part due to the pandemic and the opioid crisis in America. You know, America spends almost twice as much on healthcare as any other nation, yet Americans get the right treatment, according to a RAND study, only 50% of the time. So that means we need to use digital services to change the way we care for patients, to transform the health delivery system and public health infrastructure. The pandemic produced a generation of health professionals and technologists with the muscle to think public health. Let's broaden it from responding solely to the pandemic and apply innovative, disruptive approaches to other health challenges. Let's examine the strategies that have been put in place during the pandemic that worked better for people and incorporate them into contemporary care. We now have, colleagues, a once in a century opportunity to redesign America's healthcare system with technological innovations and transformational approaches so that it focuses on the patient, creates a continuum of care from the hospital to the home, mobilizes the community, addresses the socio-cultural determinants of health, and emphasizes the power of prevention to effectively address COVID and the many other health challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. I think that the pandemic has sparked innovative partnerships between technologists, design, and public health professionals. Look at this BioSummit today to develop solutions for COVID-19 surveillance, communications, testing, contact tracing, drug device and vaccine development, and medical supply production and deployment. To date, there's been a surge in technology experts who want to apply their skills to address the coronavirus public health emergency. The collaborations generated from addressing the COVID-19 pandemic should serve as a model for how public health and technology experts can and must work together to respond to this national emergency, as well as to future health challenges. For me, COVID-19 has underscored the need for establishing a new field of public health technology. And this is what David and I have written about, that creates careers for accelerating the modernization of our country's public health infrastructure now and in the years ahead. It means inspiring a generation of computer science, engineering, and design students who have lived through the pandemic to apply their skills to advance public health. These students have gone into business, entertainment, the biosciences, and other fields in the past. We need them more than ever in public health. We need to invest in the human capital for public health innovations that can advance health in the United States and globally. So to achieve this goal, we are planning a multidisciplinary convening of public health, medical, technology, design, and other experts to explore the establishment of a new field of public health technology. Think about it. The fields of bioengineering came out of World War II. I think the field of public health technology needs to come out of this World War III against an invisible enemy, the coronavirus. The hope is to seed new ideas, college courses, certificate, degree programs, and collaborations across disciplines. Let's envision schools of public health technology, and let's make sure that technology and analytics training becomes a second language in public health school curricula. The result should be fostering collaborative relationships between public health and technology professionals to accelerate future innovations to fight disease and build a culture of health in the years to come. It means also working to modernize our federal health and nutrition programs in this decade by ensuring that there is a cohort of technology and design experts who can serve as members of senior leadership teams in federal, state, and local public health departments and organizations. These assistance programs were built decades ago, and they need to be redesigned with the consumer in mind so that it's easier to enroll and cross-enroll in programs, get recertified, and receive benefits digitally. Well, the great scientist Louis Pasteur once said, "Chance favors the prepared mind." We need to remember the lessons learned from this pandemic to inform future disease outbreaks that will inevitably occur and to chart a healthier future for our country and world. After all, throughout history, infectious diseases have killed more people than war, and we must remain vigilant against them. So, David, I think that, we need this medical, public health, and technology professionals working together in new ways to reimagine, to renew, and modernize health systems to the benefit of people in our country and around the world. And that is what creating a new field of public health technology is all about. And I look forward to working with everyone on this call to achieve that goal.
Okay, Susan. Everybody, can we give a round of applause and thanks to Dr. Susan Blumenthal? Susan, yeah, really, again, I think the chat has been very, very much engaged in a lot of the ideas you're discussing and the points that you're making. I think for me, this event here at the BioSummit, again, it is very much a global event. But I think one of the core kind of connections between what's happening in the United States and really everywhere in the world in this particular community is this idea of kind of empowerment at the citizen level and what we can be doing at the grassroots. And so, just a couple questions to start, and everybody please do put your questions in the chat and feel free to raise your hand as well in Zoom. One question I had for you, Susan, so that there's one part about, of course, the future of public health technology, but just in general for this community, you've had so much experience in government and working in policy. How can communities like we have here at the BioSummit, better engage with policymakers? How can we better actually work with officials to try to make change happen, for public health, but also in other areas around the life sciences? I don't know if you've got kind of certain tips or advice given all of your decades of experience.
Well, I think our congresses, our parliaments, they're response organizations, so stimulus response organizations. So I think if citizens rise up and they let their policymakers know through emails, through calls, that this is important to them, things can happen. I mean, just look at the climate crisis. There will be now billions of new dollars in the United States Congress's legislation to address this problem that just a decade ago people weren't recognizing. And in part, it was because youth rose up, a new generation rose up to use their voices to influence elections, to say that this was a powerful issue for them, for generational change. And it became an intergenerational compact, really, to change this issue. And I think this has to happen with public health. I think, the pandemic has provided a wake-up call, I think, to every country that our public health infrastructure had deteriorated. as I was mentioning, even in the United States, which is considered the biomedical capital of the world, we weren't prepared, whether it was data monitoring, whether it was contact tracing, whether it was having vaccines ready, having personal protection equipment ready, whether it was websites for, vaccine roll. I mean, it wasn't there. And I think if the United States doesn't have it, many other countries didn't either. And in the developing world, this is more of a problem. I think we need to piggyback on, in the developing world, on the programs and the health systems that have been built to respond to AIDS. And, and there's been a real healthcare system, and distribution method there to make sure that vaccines get out there. I think we all have to underscore the need for a global COVID response, because we're an interdependent, interrelated world, and the spread of a disease like COVID, like Zika, or tobacco, it's just a jet plane away. And so I think that we have to work together as a world. And I think it's been very hopeful that this administration has re-engaged with WHO and has, and is listening to people about what they need. But in terms of the global response, I think that people have to let their policymakers know. And then we need to work globally. We need to develop an interdependent chain. And I think also, David, the kinds of work that you're doing in terms of convening these kinds of summits and hearing global voices, I think is very useful. And using these kinds of platforms more widely, I think would be helpful. Adding a global component to all of our meetings, I think would be very useful.
Well, I think two aspects too. This was our this is the first year that we have a youth and science track here at the Bio Summit, and I think everything and the kind of meta theme for this year's event is science activism. So I think your call to have communities and young people, rise up in whatever countries they're in to really advocate for their communities, I think is a really big theme of this event as well. I want to go to Andy Scarpelli, who's got his hand raised. Andy, go for it.
Hi, I'm actually looking at the chat, and there's a lot of what I'm going to ask about in this. You were talking about the amnesia of past pandemics and the fact that there isn't this imperative out there, and there's this need for a new public health paradigm and new technologies, and we need to recruit more people for this tech. But there's this problem with convincing people that there is that need. We saw with the funding for a lot of the relief for COVID that it wasn't distributed at the local level because there wasn't that rise up. So if this is the perfect community of people who can buy into this, that see the need for new technologies, how do we best communicate that to our communities, that this is something that we need to build? Because if we need that push from the people, how do we actually build that push from the people as the people who have bought into this the most?
Right. Well, I think, again, rising up and letting people know that this funding needs to come to the local community, but also the idea of this new field of public health technology is really to embed people with these skills at the local level in the communities to, gather better data, to find more innovative ways to distribute medicines and vaccines, as well as to prevent disease in the first place. We've lost opportunities if people get sick. We need to figure out how to keep people healthy, to build a culture of health around the world. So, I know that there are efforts underway to kind of create, a global innovation system, so that, we're hearing the voices and distributing services worldwide. It's going to take time because it's so, as I mentioned, so atrophied. And but I do think there's hope, because if you think about the AIDS epidemic, let's use that as a model. It was an emergency when it was established 20 years ago, and people were dying. And now, as a result of medications and a health system strengthening work, because the medications alone won't help if you can't distribute them and have people take the medications. So, it's shown us that you can do. Death rates have plummeted from HIV/AIDS in the developing world. And now it's become a chronic disease. So I think this shows us that there is a pathway. And I think that it doesn't happen overnight, but I think there's an urgency now. And I think, as I said, it's a wake-up call. We can't turn away from this, you know, and I think whether we seize this crisis to build a more modern, more affordable, and more inclusive healthcare system in our country and around the world is now up to us. And so our individual voices are going to be very important. And they're, you know, again, I don't know, where are you located, Andy?
I'm in Chicago.
In Chicago. So I think there is going to be money in the Build Back Better and in infrastructure bill, you know, for local healthcare systems. I mean, this was something that was put into the bills. You know, we need to make sure, again, as citizens, that it's distributed and that it builds resilient structures, that we're not, as I said earlier, just doing the same thing, putting more money into the same thing that didn't work as we needed it to work. And so that's where we all have a role to play, at letting our policymakers know that we need innovation in the system.
So everybody, and thank you, Andy, thank you so much for the question. What we'll do here, and just to say too, as Susan mentioned, we are working on trying to convene some gatherings in 2022 to really think about what a multidisciplinary field of public health technology could look like. This is a global field. Again, you know, you kind of look across the board, and this is something we see in the BioSummit, the merger of, you know, science, technology with social science, design, arts, et cetera. The idea of kind of disciplinary boundaries, and even just in our talks just now with Jenny and Tomas, we really need to bust those silos, right? And so busting those silos in the context of public health feels like a really critically important thing to do. And so what we'll do is we'll circulate a little sign up sheet. So if you guys have you know, email information that you'd like to add so that you can join us for some of these things that we're planning in 2022, that would be super great. And again, I'll hopefully have Susan pop over into the Slack as well. So we have a whole Slack channel all about public health and responding to COVID-19. So Susan, I'll send you the link there, and hopefully you can engage with us there as well. Because again, your experience is so valued, and something that I think many of our community members would really enjoy engaging with you there. So
thank you so much, David, and thank you again for your, you know, visionary leadership, and to everyone on this call, thank you for what you're doing in, you know, your countries and your cities and your communities, you know, to improve health, you know, locally and across the world. And this collaboration is so important because, you know, we can't solve these problems alone. So thank you so much, David, for the opportunity to participate, and to all of you for being here today.
Wonderful. Everybody, can we please thank one more time Dr. Susan Blumenthal for joining us here. Thank you so much again, Susan.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm reminded of LaDonna Bravebull's words from the opening too, which is that we all need to support each other, right? I think at the end of the day, we're only going to get out of these major global problems by working together. So, so thank you so much again, Susan, for being here. So everybody, again, all afternoon, we've got a whole track on responding to COVID-19, and we'll be discussing a lot of the future of public health in that session. But for the next two talks, we're going to shift gears a little bit. The next speaker, again, has been a part of the BioSummit since the very, very first one. So Clayton, if you can help me highlight Pat, Pataranutaporn. Pat is, again, I think a walking embodiment in some ways of what Susan was describing for the future of public health, in that, you know, what happens if we combine and merge together interests and creative disciplines, from the arts to design to technology. And I think Pat is somebody that really, it's hard to imagine a person that is bringing in so many creative disciplines into one person. And just to shout him out again, these beautiful backgrounds that you see, the logo, this is all designed by Pat. Every single year we go to Pat and say, hey, Pat, it's BioSummit 4, it's BioSummit 5, BioSummit 6. I don't know how he does it. And he does it basically in, like, it feels like 10 minutes. I feel like, you know, we send Pat an email like, hey, Pat, can you help us with the new BioSummit logo? And then boom, he's got this just incredible new design. So his design skills are unparalleled as well. And he also designed the LaDonna Bravebull Science Activist Award logo. So all part of Pat's creative work. And yeah, it's Pat again, you know, at the very first BioSummit, this is his first time visiting MIT, actually. It was at the BioSummit, I believe. And, you know, for him to come from Thailand and Freak Lab, and really, I think, you know, many ways, Pat, you came to the Media Lab through the BioSummit. So it's so cool and amazing to see your arc over the past 5 years. And now you're in the middle of your PhD at the Media Lab, and kind of blowing all of our collective minds around the world with your work. And so even your talk title, I just want to read it out loud because I think it's so great. Pat's talk is titled CyberBiome Towards Biodigital Symbiosis with Microbes, Machines, and Magic. So everybody, please join me in welcoming to BioSummit, or re-welcoming, who's never left, has always been here, Pat Pataranutaporn.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. Let me try to share my screen. Okay. David, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it now. Yep, beautiful.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be back at the BioSummit. Yeah, as David said, I never left. And as David mentioned, this is the 5th time that we have the Global Community BioSummit, which made me reflect a little bit on all the design logo that I had, contributed from, the first and the second BioSummit and the 3rd and the 4th and the 5th, which I want to credit to our friend Nicole Barker, who has been, many of you have known her since the first BioSummit, who has kind of created this beautiful template that I continue to use and evolve to create new version of the BioSummit. So I want to kind of bring that credit to Nicole. And yeah, kind of as I look back at this, it's kind of interesting to see how all this logo evolve as the community itself. So BioSummit is evolving, so as the logo, that's why it looked like this. But one thing that I think is consistent throughout all the BioSummit is my persistence in presenting my slide with dinosaur. Every year since the first BioSummit to, it become, I think, more severe as I become dinosaur in the 3rd BioSummit. I always sort of like bring the research that I do, connect it back to the idea of dinosaur, right? This has been the trend, which I think is also interesting to look back as well. To me, I think dinosaur represent something that is really interesting about nature and biology, right? This is the biological complexity, it's the wonder of nature. To me, dinosaur is the embodiment of synthetic biology itself, right? But as you know, biology is not perfect. All the dinosaurs went extinct, right? So if there is a chance that we can sort of maybe have the dinosaur back, we could think about coupling it with, digital technology, especially with Dr. Blumenthal talk about how do we combine technology with, biotechnology together. I think the concept of biodigital symbiosis is very critical, not just as a futuristic idea, but something that can be applicable for the pandemic crisis that we're having right now, which I'm going to talk about later. But this idea of biodigital symbiosis, I think it represents a bigger concept, the idea of cyborg or cybernetic organism. This idea of cyborg, has been around since 1960, 9 years before Apollo 11. This idea was kind of, to imagine what it would be like for biological system to have a connection with digital system. Like, how do we put human in space by augmenting the biological organ with technological organ, putting machine and human together, right? It's a visionary concept, back then, and I think it's still now, many years later since the conception of the idea of cyborg. But I think one thing that I really like looking back at that paper is the vision that, the purpose of cyborg is to free human to explore, to create, to think, or to feel. The goal of cyborg is not to become a robot or machine, but to use machine to liberate us from tasks that can be augmented or automated by technology so that human can be more human than we ever been before. And I think this has been sort of the goal of my research as well. And yeah, and so to bring technology and biological system together, we are essentially bringing the genes and the bit together, the organism and the computer, and, thematically bring together something that is timeless, the timelessness of biology that evolved for a long period of time with digital technology that can provide timely feedback and intervention and create the symbiotic relationship between the two. In my master thesis before I became a PhD student, I explored this in detail, and not just the technological part, but also the story that it came with. To me, Donna Haraway, who's a cyborg feminist, had said that it matters what story tells story, what thought think thought, and what worlds world. It's really important to think about, what technology and what imagination is created from the research that we do. So in the first chapter of my research, I begin with a speculative scenario drawn in cartoon, which you guys can see is already on MIT DSpace. My work is about wearable technology for augmenting human capability, and I begin the scenario with what would happen in Bangkok 2050 if this technology were to be democratized and used around the world. And what is really cool is that all the research that I talk about in my presentation came from the actual project that I do at MIT Media Lab. These are the projects that that we develop and publish in a scientific journal and conference, but I extended it further to think about the imaginative implication of this technology. Recently, the first project that I want to talk about kind of focus on how do we bring bio and digital together to allow us to explore new frontier, the idea of space exploration and to stay healthy in space. We asked, what does it mean if we can put the lab on the body, right? This is very critical because for astronaut there is no hospital to go for. Everything needs to be performed or done on the astronaut body. The idea of the wearable lab, as the name suggests, is to think about ways that we can put the laboratory on the human body so that we can perform many of the analysis that usually done at hospital or in the lab setting. But now we can do it in the wearable form factors. And it's really interesting because before COVID, people always ask me, why do you want to swap the body to sense biochemical markers in saliva or urine or blood or whatever? And I think now it is clear, right, that the reason we do this is because we want to understand the health condition right now with the COVID, right? We swap biofluid every 2 days or a couple times during the week, and this is really interesting because it provides us with insight in terms of the health condition that we have. In the project that I present here, we look at biomarkers in saliva specifically. Saliva contain biomarkers similar to blood, but in lower concentration. Nonetheless, it still provide the insight in terms of depression, health, heart failure, fatigue, diabetes, and auto condition. Because biomarkers in saliva include electrolyte, hormone, enzyme, antibodies, and other things. And what we create in this case, instead of go to the hospital or go to the testing center to swap the biomarkers every 2 days, we have a wearable device that can do this automatically, continuously throughout the day. So depending on the condition that you want to monitor, you can program our wearable device that clip to the mouth and has a tube that go inside the mouth to sort of collect the saliva and place it on biosensor, paper-based biosensor to be specific, to look for changes in biomarkers. And this allows us to look at insight in terms of change in different biomarkers, like change in protein expression, glucose, ketone, pH, calcium, and so on. And our device is sort of similar to iPhone, that you can add more capability by installing new application. Our device, you can install new biosensor to it. It serves as the connection between the body and the sensor. So we have this biodigital system that continuously sample the biomarkers in saliva and put it on the sensor. And this allows us to look at changes in biomarkers throughout the days, right? Most of the time we have a sensor that monitor electrophysiological signal like heart rate or respiration, but we have no ideas how changes in the chemical in the body sort of fluctuate throughout the day. For patients with diabetes, they have sensor that monitor glucose, for example. But for many of us, we have no idea how this thing change throughout the day. With this type of biodigital technology, we can imagine the future where wearable device will be able to tap into this insight and show us how different behavior or activity influence changes in biomarkers. And the cool thing about having the device in the mouth is that you can also contextualize it with the information coming from accelerometer. So you can also detect the behavior as well. Like, if you detect that there's a spike in glucose after you chew something based on the accelerometer, you can sort of make a hypothesis that that change from glucose come from the food intake rather than the spike in the bloodstream, for example. And this is very critical for astronaut, you know, to be able to sort of have a high resolution data in terms of what's going on in their body, because as you know, space is an extreme condition, and we want to be able to monitor the astronaut health closely. But this technology is also applicable for, you know, people on Earth as well, especially if we're moving toward the idea of personalized medicine, right? So this is very critical for the future of human health. And in the future, we can think about incorporating not just, you know, biosensor that look at change in chemical, but looking at change in the microbiome as well. So creating a rich stream of data that can be monitored through wearable and on-body device, so that we can have sort of a high resolution data in terms of human health. But, you know, the critical thing is that we don't just want data, right? Data alone doesn't make any change. We want to be able to use data to create change and intervention. You know, it's really important that we can intervene in time when we detect abnormality in the health data that is coming from our wearable device. So the second project that I work on sort of tap into the idea of, you know, how can we produce the intervention on the body? And, you know, I kind of present some of this work last year as well. But the idea is that we want to look at how we can produce biological molecules on the body in the concentration that, you know, is sufficient for the person to stay healthy, especially in space, right? You know, in space, you're going to have a circadian rhythm, the sleep cycle being disrupted, you know, because, you know, you're going to have LED light all the time, or, you know, you're going to have hormone changes because of the sleep disruption and so on. So we want to think about ways that we can maybe intervene by helping the astronaut body be able to produce these biological molecules in the moment or on the body without taking in any additional molecules. And the idea of biological intervention might sound scary, but it's actually something that we do every day, right? When we take caffeine in the morning through coffee, that's when we, you know, inject our body with, you know, molecule that can stimulate the body to function more optimally, right? And the idea of using sort of bacteria cell as biological factory has been around, right? The classic example is the use of bacteria to produce insulin, which has a long history in synthetic biology and genetic engineering. But today, what is really fascinating is that we can expand the library of molecules that we can produce with bacteria from just one molecule to multiple molecules, ranging from medicine to growth hormone to, you know, stimulation and so on. And the question is, how do we, you know, produce these molecules in the time that we need them, especially for astronaut that doesn't have a lot of, you know, resources. We don't have, you know, hospital to store all this medical compound, right, when you're in space. So the idea is that instead of, you know, having the bacteria that can grow in giant bioreactor, we want to be able to sort of bring these bacteria that are pre-programmed with multiple molecules that it can produce on the human body. So putting a bioreactor in the wearable form factor. And in, you know, in the same analogy that we're thinking about digital technology as having multiple apps, and people can choose the app that they are using at the moment, right? And the device can memorize all these potential applications that can be activated in the future. We want to be able to do the same by having biological apps inside the bacteria system, so we can activate the gene production that we need in the time that we need them. And that leads to the idea of creating a wearable bioreactor. And, you know, to kind of ground it in the scenario that we are in right now with the COVID vaccine, one of my thesis reader is Professor George Church, right? And he already started, you know, working on his own DIY coronavirus vaccine, which right now is still, you know, preliminary and you know, not a mainstream technology yet. But you see the trend that the idea of personalized biofabrication can happen in the future, where people are more aware of the, you know, the application of the technology and the risk of the technology. So when the technology becomes more mature, we believe that this idea of wearable bioproduction will become much more mainstream. So the technology that we create right now look at the idea of, you know, connecting the bio and digital together, which is the theme that I have been presenting so far. And the ways that we do it is to use optogenetic, the idea that we can use light to activate the gene or the bioproduction. And you know, as you can see here, this is the work by our collaborator at bioengineering department at MIT, where they engineer the cell with 3 photoreceptors. So based on the wavelength that are exposed to the cell, it produces 3 distinct pigments on the plate. So when you shine the red light, it produces 1 molecule, green light, another one, and then blue light with the blue pigment, right? So we use this system in the wearable device where we grow the bacteria on the human body and use digital signals, to control the LED light to activate the gene pathway inside the bacteria cell. And we have demonstrated that by switching the wavelength, we get 3 distinct protein that can be beneficial to the human body. So by doing this, we can actually turn on and off the production of medicine based on the digital signal that can come from sensor data or the choice of the astronaut or the user itself. The astronaut or the user of the future can select what molecule they want to produce and have the cell produce that for them on their body. And what is really interesting here is that we can activate the cell by using the primitive compound. So in the same way that alchemists change from simple molecule into gold, we can think about the idea of using primitive molecules that the bacteria can sort of convert into different more complex medicine using this sort of optogenetic approach. So we can grow the cell in the same media, but based on the digital signal, we're actually getting distinct molecules at the end. And to grow this bacteria on the human body, we think about the idea of using a fluidic device or 3D printed fluidic device to be exact to create bioreactor so that we can grow the cell on the human body. Oops. Yeah, and we have demonstrated. Oh, can you please mute yourself? Thank you so much. And we have demonstrated that we can grow the bacteria in the 3D printed fluidic device on the human condition so that we can produce this medicine on the human body. And not only the cells are growing, we can actually digitally activate the cell inside this fluidic itself so that this bioreactor is connected to the digital system. And this allows us to imagine, the future of programmable on-demand biofabrication, where we can have, wearable device producing molecules that are necessary for the human at the moment. And the project has been partially funded by NASA, and we have, also explored the ways that we can integrate it with astronaut body through, the future of spacesuit to create this closed loop health enhancement where we are sensing the information from the body, produce them biologically, and then administer it back to the human body through a different type of drug delivery platform. And this was really fun for me, but one of the highlights during the pandemic is that I got to test my device in the 0G flight, which is, really cool. And thanks to the MIT Space Exploration Initiative, I get to wear, my wearable sensor and actually produce the molecule in the 0G flight. Of course, bioproduction take longer than the whole flight period, but we already, start to demonstrate this in, the space-like environment. And this, give me a lot of idea in terms of how do we improve this wearable bioreactor in the future and creating, the next generation of wearable bioreactor where we can have, a high volume of the bioproduction and can have multiple production happening at the same time in parallel, by creating, larger scale bioreactor and microfluidic device with new sensor and new capabilities, which is super exciting. And we also launched this book, which, feature different research from MIT Media Lab that are exploring how bio and digital technology in the future can kind of augment space exploration. It's also really cool that we can open source this technology and use it in larger scale mission as well. Next year, well, we're gonna launch our project to the International Space Station, looking at how we can use this sort of 3D printed fluidic device to create a bioreactor that allow astronauts to be able to produce molecule based on the space waste that they can recycle through the process. So going beyond just the health augmentation using the same technology. And what is really cool about this project is that all the hardware that we create for this will be open source, so that when future space researchers want to kind of develop on this, they will have everything from the blueprint to the code to be able to build on top of it. Further the DIY and the community bio movement to doing it in space. this idea of bringing the bio and digital together, I think is very crucial. It allows us to go beyond synthetic biology to think about, the best of both worlds, right? The best of digital technology and the best of biological technology coming together. And I also want to highlight that, not only that right now we can start to bring sort of the digital and bio together in this way, we can also start to think about the digital becoming bio in the other way, in the opposite direction as well. We have seen, the digital becoming more like biological system through the work that I showed before, but you can also see the other way around as well. Like this image that you're looking at it here. This is not the cross-section of plant or living system. This is actually an architecture of a Microsoft AI system. You can see that, not only that we can engineer biology like digital technology, but the digital technology itself start to resemble the form of a living system as well. And that allows us to think about, what if in the future you also have, sort of the AI doppelganger or a virtual character that can sort of resemble a certain aspect of ourselves. And in my work, I'm also exploring that concept, asking what if in the future, as you travel into space, you can be with multiple versions of yourself so that you're not alone or being kind of in isolation. This project came from actually the conversation I had with Teja, who many of you know, after we watched the Godzilla movie and we see that there's a three-headed dragon. And we wonder, what would happen if human can augment ourselves by having, 3 heads, and each head can resemble different personality, from, a younger version of myself to the older version, to the masculine or the feminine, so that all these heads can help make decisions together and create this kind of biodigital symbiosis in a different way than we have before. And these heads, are trained on my social media data. So how I changed over the last 10 years that are reflected on social media, so that I can, create multiple heads that can respond and interpolate from my personality. And I can ask different versions of myself, what should I do for my research, or what do you think is the future of synthetic biology, and so on. And the different head will have different personality to sort of help me make a decision. And it's really cool, when you start to, be able to reflect, seeing AI version of yourself sort of on the same body as you, right? And maybe in the future, before you make critical decision, you will have a Zoom call with multiple version of yourself, right? Which is, I think, a fun and crazy idea. So all these projects that I present here, I think, demonstrate the vision of how bio and digital will come together in the future. How, we are not going to engineer biological system alone or engineer digital system alone, but the interplay between the two, I think, is very critical. The intersection between, timeless biology and the timely digital, the genes and the bit, the computer and the organism, I think, will be very critical. And as you see, these two projects are exploring sort of two aspects, one going into the deep space using synthetic biology to allow for space exploration. Another one, allow us to sort of have self-reflection by using synthetic character or synthetic human. Even though both of technology are, building on top of, synthetic machine or machine that, are sort of engineer the fundamental part of the human, right? Engineering the cell or engineering the human identity. But what I think is really interesting is that it, allow us to imagine new possibility, the magic that I think is the core of the Media Lab and the community that we are in right now. And as I work on this project and think, back about the cyborg dinosaur, to me, I think the dinosaur not only represent the technical possibility of things that we create, right? It also represent the tremendous responsibilities that we have as well. If the cyborg dinosaur get released, right, it will be, more damaging compared to like Jurassic Park, which is a dinosaur itself, right? So to me, cyborg dinosaur or the idea of CyberBiome really, show the double-edged sword of technology. Marvin Kranzberg, who wrote the 6 Law of Technology, said that technology is neither positive or negative nor neutral. To me, the cyborg dinosaur remind me of that technological possibilities, the magic, and also the tremendous responsibility that we need to have in thinking about this technology. And in conclusion, I think the idea of bio and digital together coming into one, it really make us need to rethink about what does it mean to be human. human, we are Homo sapien. We characterize ourselves by the intelligence and ability to create tools. But does technology progress? And we start to use part of the fundamental building block of biology like cell and DNA to build new technology that are becoming part of ourselves, like organs. And we start to have symbiotic relationship with AI and microbe on the body. Maybe we need to shift the perspective a little bit from thinking of human as a a sentient species, but as human as a symbiotic species where we have symbiotic relationship with many aspects of technology and even bacteria on our body. And with that, I think it's really important to go back to the original vision, right? The reason that we put technology is so that we can be free to explore, to create, to think, or to feel. We don't want to become robot. We want to be more human than ever before. And with the technology, I think we can do that. And with that, I would end with my favorite thing, which is the cyborg dinosaur. So thank you so much, and very excited to be back at BioSummit.
Everyone, can we just get a crazy huge ovation for Pat?
Woohoo! Thank you so much.
Pat, that was so epic. Mine's completely blown. I think again, I feel very lucky because I get to see Pat very regularly at the lab, so I know what he's up to. But I knew that his work would just really shatter everybody's minds and imaginations. So Pat, thank you so much for sharing. And actually, we have a bunch of time now, actually, just to say. So I want to apologize for everybody. I know everybody's really excited for Lisa Joy. Lisa is going to join us, but actually she's going to join us a little later now today. We had a little scheduling Tetris that we're dealing with. So Lisa's actually going to join us for a fireside at the evening plenary. So she's going to come to us at 7 p.m. Eastern time, 4 p.m. Pacific, FYI. So apologies for the late change in schedule, but Lisa will be here later. So that has the other positive ancillary benefit that we have now more time with Pat. So everybody, if you've got questions for Pat, please raise your hands. We can continue to hang out here for a little while longer. Mac, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, great talk, Pat. That was really awesome. And I kind of have a question that ties in with actually Dr. Blumenthal's talk. So you've clearly done a lot of research into these wearables that collect biometric data to kind of take us into the personalized medicine revolution. But we've already had kind of some version of this with period tracking apps or Fitbits or other things like that, where we have all of this biometric data, but it's not being used, at least in Canada, and I think in the USA as well, by our medical professionals. And I'm just wondering if you've done any research or have any insight into how we bridge the gap between this data collection and actually making it useful.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons that we have a lot of data and we haven't really been able to sort of make meaning out of them is because and this is also what my experience working in the wearable eye sensor as well, is that there are people that just work on making new sensors, just collect more data, and people that work on sort of using the existing data to make meaning out of them. And these two people are not really talking to one another. They become specialized in their own field. Like there was one researcher that working on cortisol sensor, for example, and just focus on trying to detect the accurate sensor, but haven't think about how do you kind of contextualize it in the daily activity, or when do we want to measure the stress from cortisol and so on. So I think one way that we can sort of mitigate this is to bring people together like the BioSummit, so that people can have more conversation with one another, and also think about ways that these sensors can go out from the lab. We have many sensors that have been created and published, but none of them can work in the real world setting. Then that is the place where the data are being generated and created, right? So we want to be able to sort of how to take the prototype in the lab and put it out there in the world, so that more people can have access to it and generate more data. I think the last part that is also really critical is that the technique that we use for analyzing the data need to evolve as well, right? Sometimes we don't have clear label in terms of when we see.
My mother has always wanted the children to know.
May I just say? Oh, sorry.
You're muted.
Thank you. In many times, we don't have method to analyze data when we don't have clear label. And human body is very complex, right? We need to think about ways that we can look at changes without saying that, oh, this is depression, or this is no depression, or this is these conditions or not that condition, we need to look at things from in a whole spectrum and have new method of data analysis that can look at the more holistic data rather than sort of a more linear categorization. So yeah, so these three aspects could potentially help with that. Yeah.
And I think thank you for a wonderful talk. Really creative. I wanted to say to Mac, thank you for raising that issue, because I think it's that kind of what public health technology would do is to find mechanisms to take all the data that's being collected and use it to prevent disease, and to create the interventions that you talked about. I think what we found with the pandemic, for example, was there's all this data collected, but nobody's bringing it together and looking at patterns and trends. So at the biological level, that's needed is very much so in terms of at all levels, at the very biologic level, at the macro level. So thank you again for raising a very important idea, and we're thrilled to think about how we can work together, to build a public health system with this data.
I think what you said about the revolution of the public health system is very important, because I think right now our systems aren't built for prevention. That takes a very different funding model, I think, than the health system we have today. So hopefully that changes soon.
Thank you for your comments, Mac. Absolutely.
Great. I'm so glad, Susan, that you're still here and that we can have this collective conversation together. This works perfectly. We've got a whole bunch of hands raised, so I want to keep going with the questions. Tim, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, blew my mind, Pat. That was awesome. And I'm thinking a lot about, that last kind of discussion was about health stuff, and I'm kind of going all the way back to Jenny's talk much earlier, and I'm thinking about this idea of bioapplications or bioapps. And have you thought about, or are you at all interested in sort of taking away the sort of definitely groundbreaking part of a wearable and just saying you could have a bioreactor that does that? Because that to me sounds like it was also really useful to just have a programmable, I want to make this medicine, I want to make that medicine, and kind of just have a little box that you keep on your shelf. What do you think?
No, that's definitely a really cool idea, right? And many researchers, I think David also have worked on that area of wearable, but not wearable, but sort of personalized foundry that you can have at home, right? And people have explored it in different areas. Yeah, I think that's a fascinating idea. Right now we're limited to 3 molecules that we can switch, right? But in the future, as we have a more precise, photoreceptor or auto mode of converting digital signal into biological signal, we'll be able to have a scalable bio apps later. Right now, you can think of early computer that have 3 software to switch from, but as you know, digital technology explode exponentially. So yeah, that could be a area that would be impactful in the future as well. Yeah, you can produce any kind of medicine, any place, anywhere. I think that would be very important in the future. Yeah.
Okay, great. Shout outs to decentralized and distributed manufacturing. And actually, yeah, to Jenny's talk too about reagents being the means of production of the future, and the present. Sequoia, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, this is a question for Pat. Thank you for such a great talk. So I've come across this idea of having wearables also being like a mutualistic symbiotic relationship with humans, and I'm just curious where this idea came from for you, and if there's a lot of other research going on in this area. And just I have a background in ecology and evolutionary biology, and I think about symbiosis, and I just want to remind everything that symbiotic relationship can also be a parasitic relationship. So it's important to say a mutualistic relationship, and not necessarily that we want to start growing parasites on ourselves.
Right. No, I mean, that's really important. I think the idea of human-machine symbiosis came from Lick Leider, who's a scientist that think about how do we augment human capabilities since like the 60s and even before that. So there's a long tradition in human-computer interaction, thinking about how human and technology will have this symbiotic relationship in the future, and introducing sort of the biological component to it. Was something that has been done relatively new to this long tradition of thinking about human-machine collaboration. Yeah, but I think it's really interesting. Like, how do we prevent the parasitic relationship between the host and the symbiont? I think is very important. my advisor, Professor Patty Mars, always say that, you know, technology is becoming more and more addictive. Like the phone that we have, even though when we turn it off and put it on the table, there's study that show that even when you have it off and put it on the table, your eyes turn to it more frequently than the partner that you have conversation with. So even when the technology is off, it's already alter sort of the way that we communicate with one another. So how do we, you know, reverse that and you know, rethink that relationship between human and technology, not just between human and biotech, but human to technology in general is a big issue. And that's why I love going back to the early vision of the technology, like the Manfred Klein, Nathan Klein paper on cyborg, because the technology idea is so profound, but the vision that they have, like the idea that, you know, you want to be more human than machine, right? You don't want to become robot addicted to this machine, always checking on it. Then you are not a human anymore, right? With social media and modern day technology, sometimes we cannot really escape the imagination of, you know, new type of technology that can, you know, allow us to be free human. But if we go back to the, you know, historical paper, that vision already exists. We just need to sort of, you know, revisit it and reinterpret it in new way. I think, you know, imagining new possibility is, you know, as important as, you know, creating that technology itself, because sometimes our imagination is so limited that the thing that we create only, you know, subscribe to the oppressive pedagogy that is dominating the world right now. I think we can look at new possibility and imagine new ways of being and living together. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Carolyn, you want to ask your question? Carolyn Angleton?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, David.
Hey, Carolyn.
Hey, Pat. Oh my goodness, it is just so great to see these ideas develop. It's just amazing, you know, because you talked about this really early on in our early bio summits, and to just see this progression of ideas going from envisionment to actualization is phenomenal. So my question is, how do you go from these small kind of patches on the body to actual production of, you know, like these large packs of biomolecules that you're talking about for space? Just love what you're doing. It's fantastic.
Thank you. And Karen, I remember you're one of the first people that I say hi to at the first Bio Summit. So it's really nice to see you again. This is such a great thing. Yeah, so the idea of large scale bioproduction, I think is really important. You know, right now with the genetic circuit that we have, the yield that we produce compared to if you activate the gene with like autopromoter is much lower, because the cell need to have the burden of, you know, oppressing auto function that are not being activated, right? So that's something that that can be optimized in the future. And right now for the large scale production, we just increase the volume of the cell that we grow on the body by having a backpack rather than something on the arm. And you know, the fluidic shape, I think, is very important, because, you know, this cell, you know, when we grow cell in the lab, we shake them, right? So there's like aeration, and, you know, the cell doesn't precipitate in the bottom of the flask or of the growth tube. So we need to sort of circulate the cell as we expose them to the light signal. Yeah, to continue to have them sort of grow in the condition that we want them to be. Otherwise, the cell will not produce anything if we just put them in the bag and put it on a human body. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I see the question, like you cannot beat the entropy. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So everyone, we still have time actually for another couple questions. Again, this is like, you know, Pat, you've exploded our chat. The chat is just cannot handle all the conversation about your work that's happening here. Does anybody in the chat that is, you know, and I know it's like to me, like a good virtual conference is like you've got this conference, and then you've got the conference in the chat. But does anybody in the chat want to? Oh, Jana. Yeah, Jana, go ahead, unmute, please. We'd love to have your question.
And also, I want to say that all of this work are mostly open source. So if you want to, you know, explore any of these projects, they're on website, so you can look at, you know, the blueprint, the source code, and everything. Yeah,
that's great. Jana, you want to ask your question? You can unmute.
Yeah. So thank you. It was really great. I'm still overwhelmed with the cool stuff you showed us.
Thank you.
And yeah, about the sensor, I really like the idea, because I was wondering about having this kind of sensor to detect like how about your mental health. So, and Vittorio in the chat asked me like how about the price? Did you mention about that?
About, sorry, about what?
The price, the possibility, like if we want to apply this to in the community, like how is it like cheap or not, or
yeah, this is a great question. So you know, for your first question about detecting the mental health condition, some of them are obvious to detect, some of them are more difficult to detect. Like there are papers that show that, you know, change in like, you know, cortisol in saliva or change in, you know, salivary pH can, you know, help diagnose whether you have depression or not. But, you know, human body is more complex than just few biomarkers, right? That's why we want to be able to sample multiple of them to understand what's going on. So as it's possible, but you need to couple it with multiple biosensor. Second, the cost for producing this. So the hardware is not that difficult to produce. It's just, you know, a couple motors and electronic circuit for controlling. We use existing paper-based sensor that many researchers have created. So you can look at, you know, paper-based sensor for looking at all kind of biomarkers and sort of integrate them. I think the biosensor part is a little bit trickier because you need to think about what chemical that you're gonna put in the paper-based in order to put it in the device. But, you know, there are more and more research in that area coming out. So yeah. But there are also like commercialized paper-based sensors as well, like the one that we use for looking at like changing glucose, pH, and other things that could be ordered like from Amazon and things like that to put in the device. But some more unique biosensor, it's still difficult to create. Yeah.
So, oh, go ahead, Jana.
Yeah. So just I'm just wondering also, like because I personally like taking meds for my mental condition, and I was a bit anxious about the side effect. Maybe if it's really like become a reality to use this sensor, we can see that the change, the level of the biomarker, for example, when you like take the medicine for such a period time, and maybe is it like how doctor can decide maybe the dose is too low or maybe too high. It will be really incredible.
Yes, I mean that's the idea of cybernetic, right? You want to have a feedback loop where you can sense the input and then be able to intervene and see if that sort of information change. So yeah, I mean that's, I think is really important, and having, you know, sensor and doctors that are willing to take that information into account and adjust the intervention, I think this is really, really important. Yeah.
So everybody, Pat, how can we continue to, actually, you know what, I have a follow-up question for you.
Yes.
I have one question for you. So, you know, yesterday, and actually throughout this entire conference, right, we've been talking a lot about spirit, and we've been talking about animacy, and you know, kind of and sort of in a way the repercussions of what happens when you think about what is animate and what is not, right? I forget which talk it was. There are now so many talks, but you know, kind of in earlier on, you know, centuries ago, the idea that, you know, animals are just like robots, so like, you know, they don't have a spirit, so therefore we can just go and do whatever we want with them, all the way to last night and the wonderful session that we had on a gratitude offering to lab equipment, right? Where literally we're thinking about, you know, does AI have a spirit, right? In your work, now that we're kind of combining this notion of biodigital and, you know, cyborgs and so on, do you have a kind of a philosophical thought on, you know, where is spirit represented in animacy represented in your work?
Wow, that's a hard question. I don't know if I can express it in words. I definitely have ideas about it. I haven't really kind of put it in words, and it's definitely going to be very complicated, right? Because here are something that I'm thinking about. So one thing that I think about is that the fact that we can engineer bacteria and we can start to think about bacteria as, you know, living system or living computer doesn't mean that we should think of human as in the same way. That's one thing that I wrote very clearly. And, you know, the threshold. I mean, what is really interesting is that when you think about all these processes, right? It's a spectrum. It's not like, okay, human and bacteria, they're two separate things. You know, we share the same blueprint, we share the same DNA, right? And human and AI, we share thinking process, right? That's go back to Marvin Minsky, thinking about the society of mind, how AI actually essentially a version of ourselves that is, you know, compute with digital, with different medium, right? If the body is compute with molecule, AI is computed with, you know, different type of molecules, silicon, for example, right? So I think everything is on the spectrum. The fact that we can modify or engineer or think about them or edit them doesn't mean that we should sort of devalue them. You know, even I engineer bacteria, I have, you know, respect for bacteria. In some slide that I had, I thanked my bacteria at the end of my presentation as well, because, you know, they are the one making the molecules for us, right? Yeah. So I don't think that the idea of engineering and the idea of respect is mutually exclusive. Like, you can engineer system, you can have an AI that resemble you, and you can have respect for them. I mean, you can have respect and love for everything, I think. Yeah.
That's really great. I'm loving this in the chat too. Microbial labor. Yeah, like the microbes are going to unionize against the synthetic biologists soon. Yeah. I think that's part of our labor future. Right. But Pat, again, just thank you so much for sharing your work, your visions for the future. And again, I know you're just getting started too, which is really, and just to say too, you guys don't even know, like that was Pat's top. Like, Pat is doing so many other things even outside of that, which I can't. There's a Netflix thing that's happening. Anyways, I don't even want to get, you know, say too much, but there's a lot coming down the road for Pat that we're going to be really excited to see and support.
Next year we'll have more.
Next year more. Okay.
To be continued. Yeah.
To be continued, everybody. But just can we give one more round of applause and just huge thanks and loves to Pat.
Yep, I'm here.
Alrighty.
Yeah. Hey.
So really quickly, you know, again, today we're going to have ancient future technology in the afternoon. So we got communicating science, response, ancient future technology, and also global collaboration. So an action-packed afternoon. And Jean-Luc, tell us a little bit about what we're going to see in ancient future technology.
Yeah, coming into the home stretch for BioSummit 5.0 this afternoon, 2:30 to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Chloroplast. We're going to have ancient future technology. We have lots of cool talks and workshops, all sorts of different topics, including bio-cybersecurity in the Global South, weaving with biomaterials, and eDNA time capsules, water warriors. So lots of cool content, and looking forward to everybody joining. Allison, Benno, the whole Ancient Future Technologies track team, and me, Jean-Luc. So see you this afternoon.
And basically, we all know we want to hang out with Jean-Luc for the afternoon. So if nothing else, that is your reason to go to Ancient Future Technology. And Mac, can we get some Mackenzie?
Sure. I'll actually call Andy up on the stage.
Okay, the Mac handoff to Andy. Oh, we'll do Mac and Andy. How about we do it together?
Sure. Well, you know, I think I just keep seeing so much in the chat about how much people are worried about FOMO with the afternoon sessions. And I really think the best way to fight that is just come to Communicating Science, because it would be the worst thing to fear missing out on. Because we have so much good stuff to actually come and hang out with. We're going to have a bunch of different panels and talks about translating a common language or making sure that information can get out to our communities. We're going to make sure that we do a couple of fun sessions that are going to be interactive, and make sure that you can work with other people here at the bio session to start building things together. We're going to have a good activity session in the afternoon about tweeting and about using social media and leveraging that. We're going to be hosting a talk about a couple of other community talks, including one about building a community bio journal. Please remember that the evening plenary is still going to be part of this as well. So
yes,
release a joy later in the day. And then we're going to wrap up the day with a session of wine and witches, which is a tradition that we've had for at least the last year. So please make sure you are with us all day, because you will miss out if you're not in the Communicating Science track.
I love Andy's solution for FOMO, which is just go to communicating science. And to say everybody, and get ready for your final, the family photo. We're gonna do that just right now. But as a reminder for everybody again, Lisa Joy is gonna be in the Nucleus at 7 p.m. Eastern time for our closing plenary. So what better way to bring BioSummit to a close than to have Lisa Joy with us for 30 minutes. So with that, everyone, why don't we shift into the gallery view so all of us can see each other. If you guys can turn your videos on, this is a critical moment so that we can all be remembered for this beautiful meeting together. So if you guys have an object, grab your object. Always good to have one. And we're gonna take a family photo together. So everybody, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Oh, loving the faces. You guys are so beautiful. Hold on, we'll keep going to the other screens. Oh my God, so good. And let's do one more. All right, everybody, I think we got it. So enjoy your break. We'll see you in an hour.
Give a plug for global collaborations today? I can't remember.
Oh my,
Derek was just asking.
We did. Yeah, John Allan did that earlier. Yes, we got it. Anything else actually before we close? For a break for an hour?
Workshops are going to be running all day again. So workshops start at 1, are going to be running through to closing. So I do not have the slide up and handy, but check the calendar. We have a packed schedule for workshops yet again.
We do.
So,
okay, so check your schedules.
Oh, and proceedings from Justice. Justice, you want to say a quick word about proceedings?
Yeah, I mean, what would BioSummit be if we did not archive all of the incredible content you all have generated over the course of just a few days? And so at the end of the summit, your track leads and organizers will be reaching out to get you to consider editing or expanding the abstracts you've already developed or pitched when you applied. And we'll use that content to generate our second ever conference proceedings that is dynamic and interactive. Really keep a lookout for that, because that's such an important part of our history and trajectory and evolution.
And if you didn't get to volunteer at BioSummit, you can volunteer to help us put the proceedings together.
You definitely can. And yeah, just massive love to Justice and the entire proceedings team. As I think Jenny Malloy and others have commented, documentation in open sciences turns out to be a really big deal. It is a thing. So help us document BioSummit and really create some artifacts for the future and for posterity. So thank you, Justice, as always, for all of your leadership. And thank everybody for a really great morning session. I hope your minds and hearts are as full as mine are. And yes, big love to all. And we'll see you guys in an hour for regional meetings. So please enjoy your break, and we'll see y'all very, very soon. Take care, everybody. I don't know if you guys can actually believe this. I know at some point in this process, we kind of temporarily suspended space-time because whatever occurred over the past 72 hours was way more than 72 hours. You know, so whatever kind of weird, you know, wormhole that we all entered together, I am going to sleep for like several days starting this night, which I'm very, very excited about. But everybody, you know, again, we're I don't know. I'm just so full. I'm so happy. I'm so so enriched by everything that's happened over the past bunch of days. And we've got a little bit more to go. But we are going to end so strong and end, I think, as we always do with every BioSummit, with some really, really great content, but also I think some really a lovely reflection and gratitude. So just as a little preview of what's going to unfold in the next hour to 2 hours or even longer, right now, well, in just a moment, we will do some reflections from just today. So much like we've been doing every day, we'll have every track just do a quick little report back. Then we are so honored to have with us Lisa Joy, who is the co-creator of Westworld from HBO and also principal at Kilter Films and storyteller and sci-fi wizard extraordinaire. So incredibly excited to dive in with Lisa and also with Alex Perlman here from BioSummit and the science communication track. After we spend a little time with Lisa, we'll go into the closing of the BioSummit. So we'll do some reflections, some pluses and deltas, which again, going back to some of our community practices with Marshall, you always got to debrief. You always got to figure out, you know, what are the things that worked? What are the things that we can improve on? And then we'll close with some gratitude and appreciations. And so, so that will be the close of the official program of BioSummit. But But as you all know, per BioSummit tradition, science communication has one final item for us, which is going to be one, and which we will have in the what room is it going to be in, y'all? Science SciComm.
I think it's in lysosome, or are we staying in here? Lysosome.
Lysosome. Yeah. It shall be in lysosome. So we will all transition over there. So get your drinks, get your witchy stories, and Alex and Amanda are going to lead us into another really special session to wrap up everything. So with that, everybody, you guys ready? Excited? Okay, good. I can't believe Jessica's got energy. I can't believe our whole I can't believe all of you have energy after this. Whatever weird wormhole we went into, I am so glad we've been able to pull in some energy for all this as well. But why don't we do some quick report backs from the sessions earlier? Why don't we kick it off with, which one should we kick it off with? How about responding to COVID-19 and JOGL? Does somebody from that session want to share a little bit about how that went? I'm looking at Xavier, if there are any others that were part of that track that would like to share a little bit.
Yeah, I was there. I quite enjoyed that one. We started with a lot of the really neat cooperation and
Patrick,
this ethics review for community bio. Oh, sorry. Can you?
Oh no, go ahead, Derek. Sorry, your audio was a little glitchy, but keep going.
Oh, sorry about that. Audio through space. And so we then went into ethics review for community projects, and am really interested in thinking about this as training wheels for IRBs. And that really kind of helped me get my head around what we're trying to do with ethics as being the first point of attack. And boy, if we could eventually get up to having ethics in a full IRB and the capabilities of the community biospace, collaborations with academia would just get streamlined. So that's, yeah, that was really fun. And went on from there to just a lot of great discussions about specific projects. Rachel's talk was wonderful, and Rachel Arnov, that is, and she's always just so quiet and soft-spoken, but doing wonderful things. And yeah, I really enjoyed the track.
Derek, amazing. Anybody else with any quick reflections from the Responding to COVID-19 track / JOGL? If not, then why don't we move on next to, let's see, which one was next in order by organelle? I've like lost all my screens. Let's see here. Let's go next to communicating science. That is next on my list. Who would like to do a little ComSci report back?
I've moved to a comfier location, but I can do it from this background. I would love to give an overview of ComSci. So we started the day off really strong with a panel that was organized from After iGEM. It was led by Sibel Zollner, sorry. And it was super, super interesting. It was all about like using multilingualism as a strength rather than a weakness in synthetic biology. And they had created like a lovely glossary trying to make some of these more, technical jargon that you only hear in English and translate it across many, many, many different languages. It was a really amazing talk by them, just highlighting, the strength and diversity that this community has. And we moved on to some community talks that were all about sort of like misinformation and tackling that in different locations. And, unlike maybe some of the more like North American problems we have with misinformation being mistrust from the government, we were getting some Bangladesh points of, I've lost my words, points of perspectives on communicating science and making it more about teaching the science and less about like mistrust of government like we have where I am in Canada anyways. And yeah, and we moved on and we had a wonderful panel moderated by Megan Palmer, all about communicating to policymakers, and that was lovely. Thank you for organizing that, Alex Perlman. It was excellent. Andy hosted this awesome, super fun challenge game where we wrote tweets on really tricky subjects, and that instigated a lot of really good conversation about, is Twitter even the best place to communicate science? Some would say it's not, and I would agree with them. And then we moved on.
Was the answer no? That
the answer was no.
Okay, so we're burning Twitter. That's the answer.
Not burning Twitter, but maybe not using it as our main source of SciComm. And yeah, and then finally we wrapped it up with some community talks. Michelle Lay gave a really excellent, beautiful talk on new tropicalities that was very touching and really like brought together topics that we had talked about before, such as, like seeing the spirit in AI and like, making memorials for bacteria, but this time, communicating with plants. And finally, our final wrap up was about making a community journal.
Yes, very excited about that. Any other quick reflections, shout outs, comments from ComSci?
I'll just shout out that Mac and Andy held down that room all day. Amazing job, amazing facilitation. It was magical.
Yes. Actually, let's take a moment right now we're going to do more of this later, but can we just like pause and just appreciate every single organizer that held down rooms this day? Because really, all of y'all did such a crazy, amazing job. The moderation was incredible. Yeah, really, just all of the work and dedication from everybody. Just huge love to y'all. This is, again, BioSummit is us. It's the community, and really for the organizers, just cannot express greater gratitude to everybody. So all love to y'all. And let's do global collaborations next. Global collaborations and sharing physical and digital artifacts. Somebody want to give a little report back from that track?
Sure, I can do the first half at least. So yeah, we had 3 great panel presentations. We had one on what can we learn from successful global collaborative projects. And we had a variety of people on there, including Friendzymes. And seriously, people, Friendzymes wins BioSummit, right? We had a panel on creating and curating the biotechnological commons. What are the platforms that we use to share? We had a panel on lab automation, all the different lab robots, and can we all work together on doing that stuff better? We had a great talk by the folks from iGEM and Cynthia that have been building a database for shipping policies. So if you're having trouble shipping stuff from country A to country B, we're developing a place where you can look up how to do that. And we had tons of good talks, and we had a collab jam at the very end, which probably Tim can fill you in on more. I had to run out there.
Yeah, I want to express a lot of gratitude for the Collab Jam. It was so fun. So we had these sort of hello world slides, but for projects. So people were just putting up, hey, I've got this project. I've been doing it for a while. I think I'm ready for reaching out to test it, or maybe I just want to get some other people involved. And we didn't really know how it would go, and it went great. And so it was just super duper fun to hear about everyone's great projects. And if people are interested in doing those collaborations, it's in the Slack as well. So you can just kind of work through the slides yourself and hear about some of the cool projects we're doing.
Tim, while I got you, do you want to give another plug and shout out for the governance exercise form?
I do, yeah. So I'm gonna pull up that link just now, but I've been keeping an eye on the governance exercise form all day, and it's adding more and more people, which is really great. And even now with a pretty small sample size, I'm looking at it and starting to see like, oh, that's what people are thinking. Oh, people are not interested in that other thing. And so that's really, really cool, because this is a kind of way to listen to our community that works for that. So I'm about to put the link into the chat, and if you have a second, go through and just check the things you agree with. Not every question needs to have an answer. So if you're like, I don't really know, you can leave it blank, and you can check as many as you like as well. So you don't need to be hyper selective. I know it's long, but this is that's why you can sort of work through it and just kind of jump around and answer the ones that you feel are most powerful. And I think this is, like I said, even with the fairly small number of people, I think 600 people or so were at BioSummit this year.
700 were accepted to come, yeah, so.
And so we have a lot less than that responding so far, but even with what we have so far, it's actually pretty cool. So the more people who can go through and answer this, the more we're going to learn about our community and build our community to be stronger.
And just to say too, you know, again, all of those responses to the questions, they're your responses. So again, shout outs to Tim for taking the time to actually take all of your data and recreate it in a way so that you could actually all go and vote and prioritize and share what you think is the most important to the community. So Tim, thank you for the labor of love on this exercise. And everybody, if you love Tim, and I know you all love Tim, then show your love by filling out that form, okay? So we're now gonna directly tie your participation in this with your affection to Tim, okay? So we just raised the stakes on that form quite a bit, or I did. So anyways, thank you again, Tim.
Please
and
show me you love me.
Surveys are his love language.
All right. So everybody, let's do 2 more tracks, and then we will bring on Lisa Joy to join us. So Ancient Future Technology, one of our new tracks this year. So excited about everything that was happening in Ancient Future Tech. My God, it was so cool. Who would like to share a little bit about what happened in Ancient Future Technology? I don't know if Jean-Luc is still here, or Benno, or Sarah, or one of you guys would like to unmute and share.
Yeah, so I was one of the organizers helping in the back end and was requested to help synthesize for folks, even though you just listed the folks who really deserve some major props for an incredible session track. There was so much awesome stuff going on in Ancient Future Tech, y'all. We started with some short talks, and we heard, I'm just gonna pick a few highlights for myself. Emma Wright in the UK shared about how she starts all the way with where her materials grow and uses that to inform her biomaterial making process of turning seaweed into agar into strips of plastic that she then weaves using medieval like textile practices into interactive, conductive, like, I don't even know how to describe it without showing you a picture. Like you tap a basket or like a piece of cloth on the wall and it turns your lights on. It was really awesome. You should watch the recording. It was really cool. And she had a workshop showing us how she did it. We heard from Cristobal, who made this amazing project where he's using GIS mapping to show you where you can find, you know, native plants, and also use a search algorithm to see how you can locate those native plants by the uses of the indigenous populations that use them, some medicinal uses or craft uses or more. So really awesome work happening in that space. There was Aliki Kostopoulos, who was telling us about how in her company she uses nature to sort of inspire how we can all draw from the 4 elements in like sort of a Greek cosmology to galvanize community change, and how can we find the fire, water, etc. within all of us. We learned how to make homeopathic and like found materials in your kitchen face masks, and learned how to cure certain illnesses with whatever you have lying around your house, as told by some very lovely mothers of the speakers who were the undergraduate speakers who were there with us.
Awesome, it's intergeneration, y'all.
Yeah, a lot of matrilineal wisdom. What am I missing, Benno and Sarah? There was so much.
Yeah, it was an
You're
amazing
muted,
session.
Sarah.
Please, Sarah.
Oh, go, Benno, go.
Oh, just to say it was an amazing session through sharing with the, low tech, but with a very deep connection with our work, with a sense of community, with a lot of fun and creativity.
Sarah, quick thought from you?
So another interesting thing was that the track was about ancient future tech, and there were 2 talks that had more of a future tech theme, and they kind of leverage speculative design and futurism in their approach. And we also talked about the potential for running a speculative design workshop for scientists next year, which could be really interesting.
Amazing, amazing. Love it, love it. And everybody remember, I think you all know, but visit the Slack channel and the program track to continue the conversation and the connection. The Slack, by the way, is going to stay. That's like the community bio Slack. So that never disappears. That stays forever, just so you guys know. So all of the past conference participants are also on that Slack. So we keep that one going as long as the internet is alive. So that's that. Let's wrap things up with workshops. Who would like to give a report back from workshops?
I can do it. Thank you, David. We had some really great workshops in the track today. Free genes, microfluids, democratizing biotechnology, and a range of different topics were discussed. Like Patrick said, we at workshops also had Friendzymes doing at least 2 workshops that I remember. So shout out to Friendzymes. We had a workshop on how colors determine the different levels of classification, and wrap up the session with everyone's favorite, the protein sonification. We also made a Slack channel for biomusicians, so if anyone is interested, do join it. And yeah, we had a really good afternoon, and I was just really grateful to be able to join all the workshops. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And again, shout outs to Salim, Danny, my sister Shing, just everybody that's been holding down all those rooms, especially for workshops. Y'all are holding it down every single day, two workshop tracks on Fridays. So just again, huge love to everybody. And I'm just gonna do a little, I'm gonna drop this into the chat. I made this poll that made this little Google form. But this one, if after experience of all the experience, if you're new to BioSummit, this is a way for you to actually submit your interest to join our organizing team. I thought we might as well put this in here for those of you that are feeling the BioSummit love and want to be a part of the fam and help organize with us. Please submit some of your contact information there. And we would so love to have you also help construct all of this craziness that we've all been a part of the past couple of days. So with that, everybody, let us shift into the plenary session with Alex Perlman helping to,
David, what
yes.
about the regionals?
Oh my gosh, you're right. We do need to do it.
You keep forgetting them.
I keep forgetting. Vittorio, let's do regional report backs after Lisa, because I think Lisa might have to leave soon, but let's do quick report backs after that. But yeah, I'm so sorry, Vittorio, you're totally right. Thank you for reminding me. But let us go and shift to the next stage of our closing plenary. So it is a huge honor to have joining us Lisa Joy. So give me a moment here as I figure out how to spotlight myself and spotlight Lisa. Where can I find Lisa?
Hey there.
Oh, is Lisa already at the top? There's Lisa.
I just joined. Hey.
Yay, beautiful. And then also Alex Perlman. Let's bring Alex up as well into the Zoom. Here we go. Perfect. Okay, great. So everybody, it is such a huge honor to have with us Lisa Joy. So I think, Lisa, as you know, BioSummit has a very special relationship with Westworld. Noreen O'Toole, Leonardo Nam have been a part of BioSummit since the very second edition. And each year, we always have some aspect of Westworld kind of infusing BioSummit in various ways. So it's like Westworld is like the virus that was sort of like in the background infecting all of BioSummit. And actually, it's a reciprocal relationship, because I think I've shared this a little bit with you as well. But my personal view is, if you were to kind of imagine the future of Westworld, if that were to map onto our current society and our current reality, the people at this conference are the ones that are the future, Arnolds and Felixes and so on, that are the ones actually, doing the
you guys' fault.
Fault / credit. I don't know, depending on how you want to frame it. But I think definitely the characters and the folks that are part of this conference are very much, I think, descendants or connected to so many of the characters, I think, that are part of Westworld and the stories that you share. And so, again, everybody, it's such a huge honor to have Lisa here. Lisa here, of course, is the co-creator of Westworld and is a principal of Kilter Films, has been just doing incredible storytelling to the masses over the past number of years. So everybody, please join me in welcoming to BioSummit 5.0, Lisa Joy. Yes.
Lovely to be here with you guys. I was hoping I'd get to go visit Boston again, but maybe next year once this pandemic is a bit further behind us.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll figure it out. I think future of BioSummit may be some combination of like virtual hybrid reality. You know, we'll kind of see how it unfolds. But Lisa, I also want to connect you here with my colleague, Alex Perlman. So Alex is a bioethicist who works in my group, but also many other affiliations, and is a journalist, and also is critically attached to the science communication track here at the BioSummit. So I'm really excited to have Alex here with me to do a little chat with you. So thank you, Alex, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa. It's great to meet you. And just so you know, we did have BioSummit in LA last night, and we were local. I'm also based in LA, and we had a massive party.
Really? And there's like some witches drinking session after this. I'm missing all the good stuff.
No. Well, Lisa, you gotta lurk and you're totally down with the witches and wine crew. So you're with us for that. So just, you know, you can lurk and hang out. Yeah. You're in.
Thank you so much for being here with us. It's great. And we're really looking forward to, you know, talking with you about, you know, communicating and what you do and telling stories, and how narrative is so important to what we do. So I think David's going to kick it off, and then we're just going to have a little chat.
Yeah. And Lisa, I think you know too, but we're on like 3 straight days of like barely sleeping. So you're like getting us at this like optimal moment where like we're really weird and like really loopy. So just give you a little context for kind of our collective state of consciousness right now as we start this conversation.
That's how I feel, because I've been on deadline for the finale of Westworld. So
oh my gosh,
all just immediately forget what
perfect. Yeah, so like words and sentences, they're kind of optional. We'll just like stare at each other and communicate, you know, that way.
It'll be really illustrative on good communication skills.
Okay, well, just to kick things off, Lisa, and also let us know too, whenever you got to run, just, you know, feel free just to let us know. We'll wrap up. But basically, you know, to start, I think, you know, obviously you're here at the BioSummit, and this is a conference that's it's like kind of the opposite of like an academic conference about bioengineering. It's like the grassroots people that are really kind of, you know, in communities, developing open source tools, trying to figure out how to make these technologies super accessible and so on. And so I'm curious just to like start with, you know, you've been obviously been playing with biotech and synthetic biology in various ways through Westworld. And I know it's an area that you're kind of interested and excited about. Like, are there certain parts about bio in general that you are scared of, think are awesome? Like, what's your kind of reaction overall to kind of what we're all doing in our lives here at the BioSummit?
I mean, I think it's pretty incredible. It's like the next frontier, right? I mean, we're Westworld deals a lot with artificial intelligence, but I think when I think about the big changes that will happen to our world, in addition to artificial intelligence, you know, Elon is just worried about the robopocalypse, but I'm really curious about how humans evolve and how their evolution changes or is accelerated, how the evolution of the world in general changes, how the way that we eat, the way that we farm, the way that we have medicine, the way that we grow, you know, crops for, you know, food and clothing, you know, like all of those things I think will be affected by bioengineering. And not to mention then, you know, it's funny because I'm just coming from a charity for my nephew who has this really rare genetic disease, right? And you just realize like there are all these tiny genetic mutations where you don't have a cluster big enough to get real funding, you know, but they're deadly and they affect children, or, you know, even things like sickle cell, which clearly has a lot more funding, but diseases affecting minorities and things like that. There's a lot of trouble getting attention to them. And when I think about genetic engineering, I think, and CRISPR, you know, which I made my daughter watch a Nova episode on CRISPR, and she's 8. And so we were in a cab in Austin, Texas, and she starts talking about CRISPR, and the cab driver at the end was like, that was the craziest thing I've ever seen. I was like, she understands it more than I do because she wants to save her cousin's life, kind of, you know, and then in film and TV, you know, I think what we do narratively is we explore
simulations, like the wide swings of possibilities that could happen from emergent technologies. So we never go straight for the middle, right? Because that's not really good fodder for entertainment. But I do think that what we do in terms of either looking at very idealized possible outcomes or very crisis-like possible outcomes, A, it makes for good drama, but B, it also serves as kind of cautionary tale or sort of guardrails for humans in general who don't have PhDs in the sciences and who maybe have never heard about CRISPR and never heard about, you know, the technologies that literally are just on the horizon and will revolutionize the world before most of the world even understands what they are. You know, they'll just seep into our lives. And so for me, a lot of the work that I do is just, I get fascinated by some of these, you know, potential innovations. And I just imagine scenarios in which good things or bad things may result.
Well, I think what you're talking about is like, you know, you and other sci-fi writers and creatives and storytellers are really influenced by things that you see in the news. Like you're talking about a Nova episode, like that's nonfiction, that's reporting, right? That's science. And you are influenced by that. You're influenced by seeing, you know, orphan diseases and it's awful. And it's, you know, I'm so sorry what you're going through. It's something that, you know, a lot of people are dealing with and there's not enough resources. And then but there's an opportunity there where storytellers can sort of create pipelines for there to be wider attention on these issues in a way that's different from something like that Nova does, right? And so there's this subtle interplay, right? There's this feedback loop between the sort of more creative narrative storytelling and the hard science, like nonfiction stuff. And so how are you influenced by the, you know, journalists who are doing science reporting, and how do you feel like you might impact where you're coming from the far future sometimes, and how do you think that you might impact journalism?
I mean, for me, I've always been interested in science writing, like ever since I was young. I remember I used to be obsessed with like Stephen Jay Gould back when I was in high school, you know, because I'd never seen writing like that, you know, and so I started reading things like that. And then still, you know, I'm not a scientist. I just have an interest in what scientists are doing and what's happening in the fields of science and technology. So I use the news and, you know, interviews with, you know, scholars about it to try to understand on a maybe a little deeper than a normal civilian some of the issues, you know, but certainly not as sophisticated as an actual person trained in these sciences, you know. So it's kind of like I feel like a translator, you know, like my intellectual interests lie there. My talents do not lie in scientific research, you know, but because I have a natural bend towards being curious about that, then, you know, it helps me, I think, in what I tend to be better at, which is visualizing things and writing about things from a fictional perspective. Another way to call it is just animating things, right? You animate ideas, you anthropomorphize intellectual ideas so that people can A, understand them, and B, don't really even understand that they're being told an idea. They're just in it for the story. They want to see where it goes, you know? And, you know, there is some trickiness in when you try to package an idea like that, you don't want to, you know, create, or at least I don't want to. I think there is some obligation towards the truth. Like there are things that I'll totally fudge, right? Like, is AI going to look like Evan Rachel Wood and like wander around and shoot people?
Hope so.
No. Yeah, I know. That'd be great. It would be really hot, a hot future. But no, you know, it's going to be like, it's the potential for mass destruction still high, probably won't come from a girl in a blue dress, but it's just a way of, again, you know, actualizing. It could be a virtual girl in a blue dress who catfishes a bunch of people, you know, like that kind of stuff. Yeah, right? There's a bunch of ways in which it's possible. Yeah, it will probably not be as sexy as that. But it's still a good way of understanding it, and also understanding the cross-section between science and, you know, social and cultural issues too, right? Like there's a bunch of stuff about, you know, gender and sex and racism and all of that, all that kind of intersectionality and the way in which we think about the sciences. I think to combine it in one, you know, stew is sometimes helpful because people come for whatever reason they're coming and they stay and take from it whatever they want to take from it.
So you're flowing like so perfectly into this list of questions that Alex and I had been working on. So I know it's almost like you had like read the little doc that we were working on.
I did not.
I know, right? And this is what I'm saying. It's like the weird loosey-goosey vibes right now we're communicating. That's why. So just to share with you, Lisa, one thing I'm super proud about this year's BioSummit, we had the very first ever what we called the LaDonna Brave Bull Science Activist Award. So LaDonna Brave Bull was a person, she was one of the leaders of Standing Rock that was a major figure in our community, gave opening keynotes for several BioSummits, and was just kind of like our spiritual center. And she had passed away earlier this year, but you know, at one of these BioSummits, like kind of looked out at the crowd and was like, hey, you know what you guys are? You guys are science activists. That's what she said, you know, and I was like, wow, what a great term. Like, that is what we are. Like, we are on the one hand, you know, very, very curious, of course, about the physical world, building technologies, exploring the nature of the physical world, but then also doing it for a mission, right? There's a kind of a purpose behind what we're trying to do, which is very much about community empowerment, dealing with issues of justice, equity, et cetera. And so given this kind of theme, and so this is the kind of unofficial theme for this year's BioSummit is science activism. And so given what you were just saying, you know, using storytelling as a way to kind of package different, you know, kind of ideas, I'm super curious, like what your reaction is to that theme. Because, you know, for us, one thing that's come up again and again as well, you know, we think a lot about activism, but also movement building, right? Like this group here, they're in the community building labs and they're community organizers. And like step number one in our leadership practice that we very much believe in here is storytelling, right? Public narrative. In order for us to actually get any kind of change in the world, you got to be able to communicate a story about it. And so when we have like our community bio fellows, there a lot of them are in the room right now, that's what they learn first is how to tell a good story. And so I'm curious, just like, you know, when you think about science activism, you know, is that, you know, a theme that resonates to you? Do you bring that intentionally into your work?
I mean, I haven't heard the term before, but I think it's a great term, you know, I think that, and I think it's definitely appropriate, you know, like I believe in, I mean, it's why I'm so careful to try not to say anything that is deliberately anti-scientific, that could feed into a narrative about don't trust vaccines, right? Or something, you know what I mean? I don't want to monetize off of people's irrational, non-science-based fears, because I think it will hurt humanity, you know? And and there are many storytellers who are willing to do that, but I think, you know, I don't think that way. You know, I believe in the sciences. I would have been a scientist if my brain had moved in that direction, but it did not. And so I also think that nature and the science and like the world around us of fact-based exploration is infinite in its curiosity and beauty and its daily revelations. Like there is no greater muse than to just pay attention to the sort of mysteries unfolding around us and within us, you know, and that's biology. And, you know, I'm very interested at this point in like kind of mind hacking. There's so little thinking that's been done on, or, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of thinking that's been done on, but the world of psychology and psychiatry is still very, very nebulous in terms of its youth in a way, and it's like the way in which we understand practices that are scientific and how we can make. There's so many primitive things about our understanding of certain sciences, and now we're going through this time in COVID where I look around and there's so many people suffering from grave mental illness and from addiction problems, right? And you can go on an antidepressant that in the first couple of weeks will maybe increase your chance of killing yourself. You know, so there's so many frontiers in the natural science-based worlds that I'm curious about, that need advocacy, that need attention, that need funding. And so, you know, I think anyone who can contribute to that is important.
But aren't you also contributing? I mean, I feel like you were saying just now that you don't feel like that's how your brain works, like a science activist, but like I saw the trailer for your new movie and you're a climate activist. Like you're, I mean, reminiscing about what happens if we don't have like forward-facing science policy.
I do, like, you know, we can say, you know, an activist. Yeah, I'm always very careful to point out though that I'm not a scientist, because I actually think it's really important to point out who is a scientist, who has training in the sciences and who does not. Because Trump can go and say he's a scientist, right? Like we have actually the same amount of science training, right? Like, so it's very important to me to not oversell my expertise at anything, because the same bar I hold for myself is one that I must then, I guess, lower for other people. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm good at listening and translating the words of actual scientists. And I think that is a form of activism.
Yeah.
And one that I'm really, really excited to be a part of.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier in the science. We had a whole panel today about communicating to policymakers about science and also listening and creating that feedback loop that you're talking about. So yeah, we're also very focused on that, and it's been a huge part of this conference. But I did want to call your attention to something in the chat that's sort of like, the chat is going crazy, but someone wrote, I have heard I'm not a scientist more often during this weekend than any other qualifier, and I wonder why we're so casual to identify as storytellers but not as practitioners and investigators. And it was just, I saw that fly by, and I hear you about lowering bars and raising bars for people who are doing the work. But at the same time, there's something there that everyone can be a scientist if they want to and are looking.
If they study the facts of science.
Yeah.
Like, I truly think it's, dude, I would love to be able to call myself a scientist. That would be the biggest honor. I'm Asian, people. Like, this is all my mom ever wanted, right? So, you know, if I'm allowed to call myself a scientist, I'm happy to do it. I don't think it would be right for me to call myself a scientist. Like, I live in LA. It's a city of autodidacts who call themselves anything they want, right? They'll be like, I'm a concert pianist because I once saw a keyboard, right? And, you know, for me, I can literally go to a school and talk about vaccines and have a bunch of other moms be like, well, the science that I've read, and then they say some other crazy stuff, right? And I'm like, and then I'm like, well, the science that I'm read, and then, you know, so for me, there's a part of like, can we please, you know, put a casing around like what are facts, you know, and like what are legitimate sources for facts, you know, so it's.
Well, I think part of what we're getting at here is like, you know, and this community for sure, it's like, we want everybody to engage in science. Like this, like what the BioSummit is about is like, how do we get everybody to be excited about science, to participate in it in some way? So we want that, but at the same time, we also want good science. We want the science that is actually, you know, really leading to change and, you know, ultimately going to help, hopefully, you know, generate a cure for your nephew, et cetera. We want that celebrated and elevated and recognized as being not quote unquote legitimate science, but science that works, right? Or science that is actually, you know, making that impact. So I think it's like, we got to try to do both, I think.
It's a feedback loop. Look, I think the idea of being a science activist as a stepping stone to potentially a scientist is really great, right? Because there's also the sort of gender, I mean, this group, maybe not, but, you know, like there was, I guess, a gender disparity a lot in terms of people going into the hard sciences, right? And I mean, I remember, you know, I say I'm not scientifically minded. I mean, the rest of my family are in the sciences, so I don't know. But like, there was just this feeling of, I didn't learn sciences the way other people, they didn't interest me the way I was taught it in public school, right? Whereas had I had a cause, right, like the climate or genetic engineering, and used a passion for a group of people or an organization to learn more about the science, it could have very easily been a backdoor way for me to get a more rigorous training in sciences, right? But I think anything that helps promulgate scientific facts and reasonable scientific discourse is extremely, extremely valuable. And I think alliances with tech companies in terms of the propagation of non-crazy propaganda, but actually like you know, when I was a kid, we had encyclopedias. Now that wasn't the greatest thing, but if it made it to an encyclopedia, it had a higher chance of being right than if you asked your Uncle Bo from Wisconsin, right? Like, and he said, well, in my circle of friends, we've heard this, you know? So there were certain, you know, processes by which information was vetted. And, you know, there can still be all sorts of nonsense, right? I'm not saying that academia is not without a high level of bullshit, like high.
Thank you, yeah.
You know, but, you know, I mean, there's all sorts of, it has its own, everything has its own system, right? Yeah. But they're just, I think having communities that are trying based on this kind of passion for progress are very important. And I think tech, one of the biggest, you know, I write stories, the biggest gatekeepers right now are tech companies, right? Like they're the people who dictate what the truth is because they dictate the dissemination of information, right? Doesn't matter what people discover and doesn't matter what stories you write if it doesn't reach anyone. And I think that's something that's very important. That relationship is one that has to be really, really explored. And I don't think that the government is going to do it because they have their own stupid bureaucracy and nonsense, right? But I do think that that those kinds of like conversations about how can technology and science activism go hand in hand will be important.
So come to the BioSummit, basically, is your conclusion with all this is like, we need to continue to do more of these. So
yeah, I also think you need to like get Mark Zuckerberg on the phone, or maybe his wife, and say, stop doing nonsense, something right.
So Lisa, I want to be mindful of time too, because we've been I know this has been super strong, but I just want to make sure that we also have some time for the you know, folks in the audience to ask some questions. So let us know if you've got to go soon, how much more time you have. But
you know, I think if I go by like in 15 minutes or so, I'll be
perfect.
Right? It's around when my kids will start to melt down from hanging.
And just to say, if the meltdown happens, you can welcome them, because this is like this is an intergenerational space where kids, grandmas, ma's, pets, plants, living, animate, inanimate, animate objects. So just, you know,
you don't want my hangry children anywhere near you. They have this operatic like shriek that they start to do that is actually like, I love them, but it challenges and pierces through the maternal instinct. It's so bad.
Okay. All right. We definitely don't want you to harm your children. So let's I've got one other question that I wanted to ask Alex, and then if you've got one. So, okay. So just one thing I was super curious about, right? One of the big themes from this year's BioSummit has been this whole question of animacy. All right. So I wish you were here with us last night. There was this amazing speaker from Japan that basically shared their work about how they do gratitude offerings to their lab equipment. They do gratitude offerings to the microbes themselves, that they're actually in a lab where they're trying to make artificial cells, and they'll actually recognize and have ceremonies and rituals to acknowledge the spirits of the artificial cells. And so there's this kind of larger debate about like kind of what has a spirit and what doesn't. Another one of our speakers last night, Andre Yule, expert in AI and ethics. And, you know, when you think about Shintoism and what has animacy and what doesn't have animacy, it's a really like just fraught set of ethical, you know, frameworks in a way. And when you bring in biological engineering, where it's like you could have AI that is helping to generate different versions of synthetic proteins that are now being made by like an artificial genetically engineered microbe, you know, there's all of these kind of layers in which, you know, is the AI have a spirit? Then does the microbe have a spirit? How do those engage, and so on? And so, you know, Westworld strikes me as just this like place where you're constantly playing with those ideas. So I'm just curious, you know, what you think about, you know, about that, like broadly, if you have any comments about that broadly. And then also, you know, do our engineered organisms, do they have souls, you know, and should we recognize them in that way through stories?
Fuck.
You get real deep. We are like out there.
All right. Okay. Just a softball one then. Okay.
You can just say yes or no, or
really
just say maybe. Just say maybe.
Really easy question.
40%. No. You know, I guess. Okay. First of all, I was just reading that Marie Kondo tidying up, magical, blah, blah. I actually didn't read it because I figured it would be the first thing I would have to tidy up and throw out if I had that book. So I just read about it, and I'm supposed to thank the things and then throw them out. And so I kind of thanked them en masse and then threw them all out. But, you know, I think, look, I think there's a couple of ways that I look at it. I am more sciencey, like hard science, not animistic in my thinking than by most people. I don't know why. My mom's a Buddhist, my dad's Protestant, but they never really, you know, so I don't really know. So let's all take this with a grain of salt, because I don't know what I'm talking about. But I will say, from a moral, ethical, and spiritual place, I think that if you think something, if you are grateful to something, that thanking it, cherishing it, and having that kind of relationship with it will make you a better person and kinder to other people. I think that effect is real, right? And you can see it. It's almost like the placebo effect, you know, a placebo doesn't work, but it does because it seems like it does to the person, right? So you know, if you have a kid and they have a teddy bear, everybody is an animist initially, right? You literally project your mind into the mind of a stuffed creature and talk to it so you feel less alone in the world. You would not like to decapitate that bear after one of those conversations, right? Like you like the bear, you keep hold of it over life. Maybe you hand it to your children, right? And the snuggles that you put into the bear are somewhere in the bear's fluff, and then your child is holding the same snuggles. I'm not sure that it says anything about the bear, but it does say something about you and the feeling of you and the feeling of generational lingering of sentiment and love and feeling. You know, I remember telling my daughter once, it's very hard when you don't have religion or a clear spiritual practice to talk to your kids about death when they're obsessed with death. You know, she was like, you know, what happens when you die, you know? And I was like, oh, it doesn't really matter. The thing was like, you know, I gave her a hug and I was like, do you feel that hug? You know? And she was like, yeah, right? And I'm like, it means love, right? It means I love you. And she's like, okay. And then I went outside her door just so she couldn't see me. And I was like, I'm hugging you right now. Can you imagine you feel it? And what does it mean that, you know, you love me, but you can't see me. And I might go across the house and do it, but you could feel it if you concentrate on it, right? And I'm like, I don't know what happens when you die, but if there's a way to transmit or store love, then you must assume that I have that for you and that you are receiving it. And if you can believe that you are receiving it, then that in itself will probably change you, right? Like, so I don't, you know, I don't know about, you know, on the intellectual level, you know, I do think that there's a lot of credence to the idea that consciousness arises when you can make a sort of, no, actually I don't. You know what, I think it kind of like male, like praising the intellect over other things, says that the whole mental model of like, if you can make a mental model of your consciousness, examining a mental model of yourself, blah, 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 then you're conscious. And then you have like, you know, like superpowers that other people don't have, right? That other animals don't have. I tend to go towards the softer side of Sears in my understanding of consciousness. And I think it's something that like legitimately people have dismissed as what consciousness is, right? And mine is much more like, if you can feel pain, if you can feel emotional pain, if you can feel certain things, right? Doesn't matter if you understand them, doesn't matter if you have a mental model of yourself, if you have a child and you watch them get hurt and you feel something in that moment, even if you don't remember it later. You know, to me, that is a form of consciousness. Now, we can define consciousness and do in many, many different ways, right? But again, then you just go to questions of morals and ethics, right? Like, how should one behave? Should one behave as though those animals and creatures have a conscience? Because I know what it's like to like feel pain, right? Feel the apprehension of pain, feel the moment of pain, feel loss, feel sadness. And you wouldn't want to subject that to someone. And that in itself is a form of consciousness, I think, right? So I don't even know if the answer isn't necessarily for me about what is conscious, what is alive, what is not. But I do think that if something can experience pain, you ought not to deliver it.
So Lisa, there's a great quote from the chat right now. This is from Jim. Jim Sy says, Westworld may be conditioning people to think of humanoid AIs as living, thinking, feeling beings deserving of empathy, and that's a good thing. So
yeah,
there it is.
Yeah,
there it is.
And there's a lot of murder in the show.
Well, that's why we feel so bad, because of all of that death and destruction. Alex, you want to go for a quick one, and then we'll try to sneak a couple.
You know what? I
in?
know that Lisa has to go, and I feel like we've touched on so many of the things that we had sort of mapped, like storytelling and narrative and animacy and activism. And Lisa, like, thank you so much for chatting with me and David. And I definitely want to give people a chance to ask you. I know Isaac has been there with his hand up. Isaac, do you want to ask a question? He's been
Isaac,
hanging
go
out
for it,
the
Isaac.
beginning. Please, Isaac.
Yeah, hi. So the sort of the science fiction story that is the one that keeps me up at night, that I constantly thinking about, is how do we get to the end of, you know, our generation's lifespan, the end of this century, without the world breaking down, without averting the mass extinction event and the climate apocalypse. And I was just wondering, as one of the sort of preeminent science fiction storytellers of television and film, if you'd read Kim Stanley Robinson's Ministry for the Future and considered whether there shouldn't be a television show or a movie about the Ministry for the Future and perhaps the Children of Kali and the Blackwing, and how that, are you familiar with that at all?
I have not, but now I know what I should be reading tonight. It sounds fascinating. I mean, look, in terms of Armageddon and the end of the world and the end of this generation, because I do think about this a lot because of work. And it's like, I have both, like, I like answer like a mom, but also like a nihilist, right? So my mom answer is like, it's a tough road, guys. There's pandemic, there's huge environmental problems. There is a problem with truth and communications right now, a problem of severe fiefdoms, a problem of what I think is emerging global violence, storm clouds coming, water shortages. There's many problems coming up. And so, you know, it's what I tell my kids in school. I'm like, try your best. Try your best. I don't know if we're going to make it, you know, try your best. And try to surround yourself with people who are trying their best, you know, and, you know, in the end, here's the crazy thing. I don't like thinking about this for my children or for the people I love and all the people I don't know that are so wonderful. But if the world ends and humans are no longer the dominant species because we kind of fucked it up, I'm kind of okay with that. Like, I'm kind of like, you guys tried your best. You did a lot wrong, you know, and maybe now, you know, it's time for some microbes to hang out and some sea creatures, you know, and they'll do different things to this planet and they'll have different experiences and we'll be dead. And, you know, let's not be so egotistical. We don't need to control eternity. We're not that great. Jesus Christ, we elected Trump.
You know, sometimes I think about like there were dinosaurs here. You know, like there was a period of time where just, you know, so I agree I totally agree with you, Lisa. Like one of my things I like to think about is like, you know, what is like in 10,000 years when humans are like no longer around because we did X, Y, Z to the planet that made, you know, the biosphere unsustainable for us. Like, what's this planet going to be like in 10,000 years or 100 years? You know, what kind of crazy like megafauna are going to be in the oceans? And, you know, it's a pretty wild thing to think about.
It could be just beautiful. Flowers don't hurt a lot of creatures. Let me tell you that, right? Like humans, we've done a lot. We've done a lot of great things, right? And we attribute consciousness to these great things we've done. We've made rockets, we've made art, we've made music. All those I find really great. But a flower is a flower. It makes nice smells, it has beautiful colors, and it didn't really kill a bunch of people or do a bunch of weird shit in the process of becoming a flower, right? Like what we giveth, we taketh away as humans. So I don't know, I think we net out as like, vegetable.
I'm okay with that too. I think I'm with you. I'm like, I don't really mind if, you know, humans, we've done like a pretty shit job of guardianship. And I know like at this conference, we talk about it a lot, how we can do better. But like on the whole, I think I'm with you on that.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, don't be despondent. Just keep working.
Yeah.
Let's really try to earn our place in time. You know?
Ooh, there you go.
Don't be despondent though, because despondency never helped anyone. Like if you get despondent, just realize a giant flower might come and be really.
I don't see any other hands up, but I do have like a last question, like a closing question.
Let's do it.
Okay, so Lisa, you tell great stories. Your Westworld packs a lot in there, and I feel like it touches on a lot of different things. And you have this new movie coming out, and you're working on new stuff. But what are the stories that you want to tell that you haven't yet?
Oh man, I mean, I right now I'm just we have a William Gibson thing coming out soon called the Peripheral, which is really fun, and you know, we have a lot of cool stuff. We have Fallout in the works and stuff that I'm really excited about, stuff that frankly I am just producing. And what's really exciting is listening to new voices and being able to kind of work with them. I mean, I get to like kick back and not do as much work, which is also great. But no, I mean, like I've always really loved writing, but I also love reading, you know, and seeing what people that aren't me have to say. You know, I already know the things that I can say. Like, do you ever like reach the limits of your own brain? Like,
very often, yes.
Now, we've already surpassed that this weekend.
Yeah,
so
I've like lived in my brain for a long time. Like, even I can express something or figure something out in my brain that feels fresh and like express it in some way, that's rewarding. But if I'm just like smushing my brain, trying to like extract something that I like don't find that interesting because I've already thought it, like that's less exciting, right? More fun to squeeze someone else's brain for something that's new. So, you know, there's stuff that I'm working on right now that has to do with, you know, I'm interested in the mind. I'm interested in CRISPR. I'm interested in kind of bioengineering and such, but it's all just kind of being in a phase of germination right now and just thinking about that. But it's a really great time to be just curious about the world because there's so much that's changing. Like it's a great time to have a real curiosity and care for the world. It's a scary time, but so many things are changing, which means there's a chance for so much exploration, right? And so much growth. And I think that's exciting. Like, that's what I hope to have my children be excited about. You know, we're inheriting a scary, dangerous, potentially doomed world.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to be curious about in the meantime.
Yeah, well, how to fix it. We need solutions. Let's be curious about that. So, yeah.
Well, how to fix it. And also, I think, you know, Lisa, you're living with us with a good mantra for this conference, but also I think, you know, all of us to be thinking about, which is just trying our best. That's all you can ever really do. So, so Lisa, we are so grateful to you for spending some time with us. Oh, and actually, do you want to do a, for Roar for Ray, do you want to drop a link, or we can have maybe Josh drop a link to our squad here, if there's a way for us to help and contribute?
That would be amazing. Oh, here's totally my thing on Roar for Ray, which you guys probably already know about.
Yeah, please share.
I forget all the stats, so I'm not going to give them to you now. But basically, my nephew has this really rare genetic condition. So, you know, I'm trying to help them out with, you know, funding for the science. It's amazing how little they need for these kind of like orphaned diseases that make such a huge difference. But the more global thing that I found that was a problem, and I think they're making strides actually in bone marrow matching right now on the tech side of things, which might revolutionize even this problem. But until that happens, if you're a minority, if you're mixed race, if you're Asian, Latinx, if you're African, any kind of non-white person is what I'm telling you, then your chances of finding a match in the National Registry, if you need a bone marrow donor, is like a fraction of what it would be, because minorities don't really sign up to get typed. which means, so if you have like a child with leukemia and you're white, you know, they've got like an 80-some% chance, I think, of making it. And if you're Black, then when your kid goes in there for that transplant, you've got, I think, like a less than 40% chance of seeing them again. Wow. Like, done from my sister's point of view, as she thinks about her kid, you're really hoping that you get statistic, like the idea that you're going to see your kid alive, probably 80% chance is horrifying. The chance that the idea that they're going to go in for a surgery and come out and like, there's only a like less than 40% chance they're going to make, that's a crazy thing, right? And a situation that you don't want any parent to be in or anyone to be in. And it truly is, there's a race-based correlation. And so the thing that I'm trying to do isn't even specifically for Ray, you know, I'm just trying to get people of color, people of mixed race, to sign up for this registry to give other people a chance at life. There's so much misinformation talking about narrative about what a bone marrow transplant involves. It's like one day fully paid for and you're somewhat sore the next day. It's not a big thing. And you've totally replenished your bone marrow. It's not like you're like walking around with no kidney, you know? The other thing is, a lot of times what it takes to save them is just a blood draw. You don't even need to give bone marrow. And the test for it is a cheek swab, which is less invasive than a COVID nose swab. And they can send the like Q-tips to your house. It's so easy to register. And I really don't think people know how easy it is. You know, when I first heard that he'd need, you know, a bone marrow transplant, I was like ready to be a hero. I was like, I'm going to be this hero. Like, I'm going to give my bone marrow. And then I realized how easy it was. And I was like, I will get no hero points for this. This is super freaking easy. But it was a wake up call. And that's one of those things where, you know, the mix of the thinking on what it is to need a donor from the science perspective. Like, I've talked to scientists who are like, wait, that's all it takes? It takes a cheek swab and sometimes it's just a blood draw. There's so much old data about procedures and about, you know, different medical things that has really stymied progress for culture as a whole. And so I'm just kind of trying to, you know, show that it's really not as onerous as people thought it was. And that, you know, people of color need to stick together because like literally only we can save each other's lives.
So Lisa, we have put roarforray.org in the chat and we've already had people sign up. This is already is happening right now. We've already had people sign up in the chat. So Lisa, we love you so much. We love Westworld and your whole crew has been so amazing. And yeah, just appreciate you very, very much for being here. So everybody, can we all give, can we give another big round of applause and love to Lisa Joy?
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lisa.